Hi guys, and welcome to our very first episode of the brand new podcast titled the Bitter Geeks Podcast. If any of you are listeners to our previous podcast, the DC Films Podcast, you guys know that we've been working on this for quite some time now, and here we are to finally do this thing. So this podcast was created really to give us, who are part of the DC Films Podcast, a place where, because obviously if you listen to our podcast regularly, you know we go off topic a number of times each episode. So we created this podcast to be that place where we can talk, complain, rant about everything outside of the DCEU and DC films. So with this being our first episode, there's been a film in particular that has been kind of, our feelings been kind of boiling up to a point. And this is the episode to finally release those thoughts. And our main topic of discussion today is going to be Thor Ragnarok and everything we feel about it. So joining me today, if you are new to our podcast, some very close friends of mine who are also on the DC Films Podcast. Of course, I am your host, Nick, aka Nerdy Nick, on YouTube, Tremana Steel on Twitter and Tumblr. And so joining me today, obviously, are some of my friends here. So each of you guys want to go around and introduce yourselves to the listeners?
Hi, I'm Jean. I'm Backjectivity on Tumblr.
Hi, I'm Al Speed, and I'm Speed of the Oppressed on Tumblr.
I'm Danielle. I'm a Social Justice League on Tumblr.
And I'm Rebecca, and I'm the Endeavor Network on Tumblr.
Okay, and thank you guys for joining me today. I know we've been trying to get this going for quite a while now. But things have been busy with us life-wise. Like, I just got married last month, and that took up time. So things have been really busy. So finally, we're all here. Now, I want to give this kind of heads up to listeners who are, if you're tuning in, and if you are an MCU fan or fans of these characters that we're going to be talking about, we're coming from a place of, like, we don't want to come off as like we're just being assholes or dicks or just being straight out just mean or mean-spirited. We're going to get passionate, we're going to get ranty, but we're not doing that just to piss people off. Like, if you're fans, we apologize if you don't agree with us. Like, we're open to discussion, we're open to, like, people disagreeing with us. That's perfectly fine, but we just want you to understand, like, we are going to have a lot of problems with Ragnarok and other MCU films that are going to be part of the ongoing discussion and throughout this podcast. So just giving you the heads up, so that way I don't get messages later saying like, y'all are just DCEU stans, no wonder you keep shitting on Ragnarok, and y'all are sucky, and blah blah blah. None of that. So if you want to have a discussion, great, fine, but you've been warned as to what to expect. So that being said, so obviously our main topic of discussion obviously is Thor Ragnarok in this episode. And Ragnarok is a film that it critically did well, financially did well. A lot of people seem to like it. Now, myself and others have some very passionate opinions about this movie. But I think it's probably a good place to kind of start, so for at least for each of us. Like, our enjoyments from the original Thor films leading up to Ragnarok and what ultimately led to our enjoyment or lack of enjoyment with Ragnarok. So, if whoever wants to go first, you guys can go ahead and share your experiences with Thor.
Okay. Firstly, just quick disclaimer, right? Like I know Nick already said all that stuff, but like, I'm just saying that even though we are primarily DCEU fans, I think a lot of us here really started out with the Marvel movies because those were definitely the ones that hit us first, culture-wise. And so we still have a lot of love for the Marvel movies. I think I can speak for quite a few of us here. We still have quite a lot of love for the Marvel movies in some ways. And so, like, we're not all going to be negative about it. We have our positive opinions. We're going to try and balance this out here, okay? Because, like, we're bitter geeks, but we're not, like, unfairly bitter geeks.
Yeah, I want to echo that. I was saying so on Twitter last night even, like, being a DCU fan is about having your own opinions, having big opinions, liking what you like, and there's absolutely no, like, in my opinion, I don't think there's any excuse for tribalism here. I don't think that we need to be like, well, just because we like the majority of the DCU films more than we like the majority of the MCU films doesn't necessarily mean that we can't be fans of both. And I think that, we like what we like, and being honest about that, I think, is an important trait for this fandom, because we've been questioned so often on how honest we are about how much we like Batman versus Superman, or how much we liked Man of Steel. Like, we're gonna give it to you straight, because that's what characterizes someone from this fandom, in my opinion. Like, someone who's willing to be like, hey, like, I really liked this movie that everyone didn't like. And sometimes that's gonna be, I really didn't like this movie that everyone really liked.
And I mean, to add on to that, like, I'm really against the idea of like everything being black and white in fandom. You can't just completely like something and completely hate something else just because it's different from that first thing. I think like there is definitely room in fandom for us to discuss all the in-betweens. You can like something and not like something for different reasons. So like, yeah, I think we DCU fans, the whole point of being a DCU fan is that, we can appreciate all the in-betweens. We can appreciate that we like some things that have flaws in them, and we can like something despite of the flaws, and we can like them because of their flaws. And like we can take that approach to Marvel as well, even if we might prefer the DCU movies at the end of the day. And I think we can look at them with a fair mind, if perhaps one that is more inclined towards the DCEU ones. Yeah.
I think that was really well said. And like, I just think in general, like, since the DCEU really took off, there's been a lot of debate and arguments had between people, like, again, having to be like, oh, you're either entirely a DCEU fan or you're entirely an MCU fan. Like, and I started this, like, going into Man of Steel. At the time, I was still a huge MCU fan. Like, there hadn't been a movie at that point where I'm like, this is awful, I hate this. Like, even after, like, Batman v Superman initially came out, I was still of the mind of, I've enjoyed pretty much every MCU film to a degree, like, and that's fine. And, like, I can still love both. But since Captain America Civil War, which came out right after BVS, that film, I'm not even, like, quality-wise, but just that film created an environment in fandom in general where, like, you had, like, MCU films could no longer be criticized. Because if they were criticized heavily, it's like, oh, you're just a DCEU fan, so we can't take your opinion seriously. Then, like, proper debate couldn't be had about the films because, oh, the moment you are called, the moment someone, like, the other person realizes, oh, you're a fan of the DCEU, it's like, oh, well, you like shitty movies, so why am I supposed to take your opinion seriously at all? And since then, I feel like there hasn't been, like, a legitimate discussion about in my opinion, the declining quality of most of the MCU films, because a lot of times when I try to have these discussions, people just immediately dismiss my opinion because I like the other superhero franchise, which I think is completely unfair.
I would say I was 50-50 until Age of Ultron. Like, and I argued this over and over again. I was like, I am a Marvel and a DC fan as far as the films go. That's, that was like, on Tumblr, that was like my, quote unquote brand. I was sort of like straddling that fence, until Age of Ultron, and then my interest sort of organically shifted, and that organic shift happened because of the content of the films, not because I needed to like pick a side. Like, I don't care for that mentality.
Yeah, exactly. I think for me it was really different in the sense that I wasn't really aware about this whole comic book dichotomy, kind of like rivalry between DC and Marvel. Like, call me a noob or something, but like I really wasn't aware of it. So, like, when Man of Steel came out, I actually really, really loved the movie. And at the same time, I really, really liked, the Avengers films and all the MCU films. And I think I just kind of, after, like, Age of Ultron, we'll go into that at some point in this podcast, but not today, maybe. Okay, but, like after Age of Ultron, after all the subsequent movies, I drifted away from that. And then it was only after that I completely fell into DC. So it's, for me, my experience was that it was like two completely separate things that I fell into, and it just so happened that they were in the same genre because they were just stuff that I was interested in, and it just so happened that, you know, one lost my interest after a while, and then the other just attracted my interest for different reasons. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, like, for me, like, starting to kind of guide the conversation towards, like the beginning of our interest in Thor specifically, but the MCU in general, like, for me, like, I watched, like, Iron Man, like, obviously the beginning of the MCU, just as a casual, like, superhero fan. Like, I grew up, like, my first exposure to superheroes was the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. Like, those movies got me into superheroes in general. I would not be where I am today without my love and appreciation for that original Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie. And hey, and I'm a DC fan, but a Marvel character was what got me into this. So for me, like, even though, like, as I got older, I became more and more of a DC fan, when Iron Man first came out, I'm like, hey, this looks like a pretty, like, awesome movie. I've seen some of the animated stuff. I don't know too much about Iron Man, so I'll give this a shot. And I ended up loving Iron Man, and I went to go see each subsequent film. And with each film, like, at the time, yeah, it's still, like, they all kind of fit within the same, like, universe, of course. But, like, what interested me with each character was that, like, yes, there's a lot of comedy in these, but each character felt like they had, like each film felt like it had its own identity in a way. Like, walking into, like, the Incredible Hulk, or which I think is the most underrated MCU film.
It's absolutely fantastic.
Best in my opinion, best interpretation of the Hulk. Completely opposite of Ragnarok, but I'll get into that later. But okay. So then this, like, walking into, like, for me, to actually specifically talk about Thor, the moment I got really interested was the end credit scene of Iron Man 2 where they teased Thor's hammer. And then once I saw, like, the trailers and stuff, and, like, at the time, I didn't know much about Chris Hemsworth other than him playing James Kirk's dad in the 2009 Star Trek film. And I thought he did a really good job in that for the few moments he was in. I watched Thor, and oh my god, like, that movie, and that movie came out in a time where I was pretty, the movie came out, like, within weeks after my mom passing away. So for me, like, and that was one of the first films I experienced, like, with my family after that. And so for me, that movie always kind of has, like, a special place in my heart, because for me, it was the first real bit of enjoyment I had watching a film after that. And it made me just really happy, and gave me the character, and, like, yes, like, there's some over-the-top jokes in there, but, like, at the core of it, it was, like, a struggle between a man or a boy becoming a man, and about just coming to terms with who you are supposed to be, and it just, so many themes about the first initial Thor film I loved, and I'll always cherish that film. It's one of my favorite standalone MCU films. So that's just me.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything, like, that they really want to say? Because, like, we should go back to the plan now. I think we've talked a lot about, like, our experiences about this, and disclaimered enough.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So, like, first impressions and feelings about watching Ragnarok, like. Do you want to start with the people who watched it in the cinema? Did any of us watch it, like, in the cinema when it first came out?
I did not.
I was in a cinema. My college has, like, a auditorium. They show movies on Thursday, so I saw it in an auditorium. So
I show up for Thor every single time. I was there opening weekend.
Okay, yeah.
Ragnarok was a big thing for me. Well. My first moment, my warm up to this movie, and I think, like, it's weird that in the current climate we sort of have this thing where, like, first looks and trailers become a part of our experience, and I don't know, I think it's kind of detrimental, but for better or for worse, the first looks and the trailers were a big part of my experience, were a big part of me leading into it, and they made me super nervous. So I want to be transparent about that. I walked into this film kind of like, I don't know what I'm going to get, but I had really high hopes. I was like, maybe the color palette isn't so representative of the movie. Maybe it's just, like, an artistic decision, and I would be really, really hypocritical if I was to judge a movie based on its, color tone because so I was like, okay, well, you know, like I don't care that the whole set looks like it's from Fisher-Price. I don't care that this looks like a Lego movie. That's fine with me. Like, I get where that's coming from. Like, there's a comic tradition from Thor with that color palette, and that's fine. Like, it's not usually my speed, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the story wouldn't be for me. So I came in and I sort of like, okay, well, we'll make the best of this and see how it goes. There's some really cute parts, it seems like. I'm sad about the haircut already. You know, like, just sort of like, well, you know, we'll see how it goes because I'm ride or die with my son Thor. I was showing up for him, and I think we hadn't seen anything by Waititi before, and I think that really affects your experience too, because I think you really need some really concrete expectations when it comes to Waititi, because he has a very specific sort of feel and tone to his films, and that Kiwi humor is something you kind of have to acclimate to over time. And I think after watching a couple of his other movies, I was like, oh, okay, I see kind of what was going on. But I got my feelings hurt real bad in this film. I felt really laughed at. Like, I came in as a Thor fan. I came in to see the end of this story. You know, it's Ragnarok. I assumed it would be, you know, the button on a big arc. Because, you know, we'd gone through a lot, and I figured, like, okay, well, we're gonna, like, do something conclusive with Loki, and we're gonna figure out, like, this family crap, and, like, all of the stuff that was sort of, like, left hanging. I was figuring, like, we would, like, find out, like, what's going on with Jane and all of this stuff, and then, nothing. Well, what I got felt really like a personal sort of attack. It felt very personal. Like, I sat down in the seat, and it felt like the film told me that anyone who takes this universe seriously is an idiot. And that was like it was made in spite of me instead of for me. And that felt really weird, because it was like, those first two films are the reason I was there. Like, that's what got me in the seat. I wouldn't have been a Thor fan without Thor 1. So that was really weird to me. Like, I just sort of sat down and I was like, oh, that's how you feel. Okay. You know, and it was disheartening. A lot of it, I felt like I wanted them to take Thor as a character at least 20% more seriously than that, like, bare minimum, lowest bar. And I felt like that stuff wasn't taken seriously. That stuff was sort of like satirized. And I see what a lot of people are saying when it's sort of like Thor meets Guardians of the Galaxy. In that, I think Guardians of the Galaxy is a satire of Guardians of the Galaxy, and that's perfect for Guardians of the Galaxy. Honestly, I wouldn't change a thing about that. I mean, I would change all the misogyny in all the movies, but I wouldn't change anything about the way Guardians of the Galaxy approaches its franchise. I think it's brilliant. I did the first time I saw the film, and I did for subsequent films. As far as tone goes, fantastic, genius, I love it. But it's not the approach that I would have taken for Thor. It's not an approach I ever would have taken for Thor, and I think we lose something when we say, oh, this alien shit is so silly. I think we lose something really big. I think you have to buy into it. You have to be earnest about it when you're telling a story about a literal alien. You have to be like, okay, well, we're going to commit to this concept 100%, and, you know, take Asgard really seriously, and take Thor really seriously, and take Valkyries really seriously. And it felt like all of those things were sort of up for satire in this film, and there was no approach that I think Waititi could have taken that would have approached it without that level of satire, just because of the kind of filmmaker he is. So, I mean, like, it was a really demoralizing experience for me.
So, when I first got into Thor, I'm going to be honest and be, you know, very transparent about this. I actually wasn't that big a fan of the first and second Thor movies. Like, I guess for me, they kind of felt a little forgettable for me. And that's probably because I didn't watch them in cinema and I wasn't really paying attention to Thor because I wasn't like the biggest fan of his first movie. So, and his second movie came and I just kind of ignored it altogether. But then I sat down and watched it, and I don't know, I wasn't really feeling Thor at that point. And it wasn't until Thor Ragnarok came where I did genuinely pay attention to the character, and I thoroughly enjoyed that movie. I thought it was my favorite Thor movie out of all of them. Mostly because I come from a place where I didn't really care for Thor from the first two films. And with this third film, there was something that actually attached me to him, whether it be the comedic attributes to him or just the action set pieces that were presented in the film in general. But essentially, I did enjoy the Ragnarok film. However, after really looking back at the first two Thor movies, I began to realize that Thor Ragnarok is the only Thor film that actually connects with the team-up film. Because if you look at the first Thor, and then you look at the first Avengers film, you realize that Thor's entrance into the Avengers doesn't really connect anywhere with the first Thor movie. And it just felt like Thor was a character in its own and being first introduced in the Avengers movie. Then they did it again with the second movie, The Dark World, where Thor just happens to be there and there's no connection to his sequel. And at that point, I felt like maybe the MCU was realizing that Thor wasn't, necessarily doing the best critical-wise because, I don't know, I guess he didn't really hit all the right notches with people. So then with Ragnarok, I guess they felt if you can't beat them, join them, and they just made it into a comedy like the rest of the MCU movies. Now, in them doing that, I thought that was pretty much I thought it was a lazy move. Not lazy, but just predictable. Because so many MCU movies are trying to be so comedic that they focus so much on the comedy that they sacrifice some of the little things that could make these characters greater than what they are. And I felt like that's what happened with Thor, because if I remember correctly, and you guys can tell me if this is true, was Thor actually smarter in the other two Thor movies?
Yes.
Oh yeah. He's gotten dumber and dumber.
Yeah, that's what I felt. I felt like Thor just got dumber and dumber in Thor Ragnarok. That was my initial gripes with this character, is that he felt like he got sort of dumber as the MCU continued on. And it felt like it just wasn't all there.
I would not say so much smarter and dumber versus definitely I agree with that. Sort of like moving toward that jock bro stereotype that he never really embodied in the first film. Like in the first film, like he was kind of a dick. That was like a theme, but like the whole idea of the first movie was him moving out of bro dickness.
Exactly.
But he wasn't like he wasn't like a he still wasn't, when he started, he still wasn't like a jock bro dick. He was like a Prince dick. Like he was like Prince Dick. Like he showed up and he was like Chris Pine in Into the Woods. Like he was just like like spoiled and shitty and just like a bad rich guy. And that was something that needed to be fixed about him. It was very much his kind of his Henry IV moment, where he had to go out and be with the common people and be reformed. And this is something that I'm sure Branagh thought about, because he's a Shakespeare guy, is that like he needed to fix this future king. But he did. That's the thing. That's the weird thing, is that every single Thor film seems to have sort of ignored the fact
guys. Oh
we repaired Thor.
Okay. Danielle, give me a sec. Okay. There's this beautiful term that I think someone else might have come up with, but I haven't seen it being used. But this is thing I want to tell all of you about, which I'm gonna be using a lot because it applies a lot to MCU and to a lot of things that I'm bitter about, which we'll probably be discussing at some point in the future, which is this thing I call Sharpay syndrome. You know, High School Musical.
Yeah.
The character Sharpay.
Yeah.
And the thing about High School Musical and Sharpay, and the thing that makes it really funny, is that she's the antagonist of all 3 movies, right? And she's the antagonist for the exact same reason every time. Because every movie, she starts out this bratty, spoiled rich kid who wants the stage to herself. And at the end of the movie, she becomes nicer and then relents and then becomes friends with the main characters, right? And then at the beginning of the next movie, her character just resets back to her original characterization with no explanation whatsoever, just for the purpose of maintaining that character stereotype of her. Because they can't let her evolve, because her original characterization, the one that she started out with, is the one that's become associated with her. Yeah, and I think that's something that's happened with a lot of MCU characters, which is that their introductions and their initial impressions are so strong that, like, you know, even though at the end of the movie, the directors who put in a lot of effort into like resolving their characters and helping them work through their flaws, like at the end of the movie, the character becomes like changed, they improve as a person, you know, they grow up, they mature. But then because the next movie has to capitalize on that impression, that media impression, you know, the one that was promoted in all the trailers of the first movie, they have to like completely reset the character and just pretend the character development just never happened. You know? Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, am I allowed to bring in the DCEU here? Am I allowed to?
Go ahead.
Okay, so you know, at the beginning of Batman v Superman, all the trailers promote Batman as this dark, you know, really messed up guy who's like shooting people or something, branding criminals, you know, he's dark and he wants to kill Superman. And that's the initial impression that everyone got of him. And so people are like, oh, that's bad, you know, that's not Batman. And we're like, that's the point, he's not Batman. If you watch the end of the movie, he's not like that anymore. But then we go into Justice League and everyone's still hating on Batman for being too dark and being too evil and depressing. And you're like, did you not watch the movie? Did you not realize that he has changed as a person and that he is able to change as a person? You know, like characters can change and evolve from what your initial impression of them is, you know. That is that kind of problem that I think like Thor suffers from, which is that like the audience's initial impression of him was that spoiled prince archetype, and it just so happens because he's muscly and blonde, everyone just like imposed like the whole dumb jock stereotype onto him. So, and I think as like the MCU has progressed and it found its tone as like a much more comedic and like kind of feel like this dumb jock impression of him has just been like pressed further and further into Thor's character, from like the first movie where he was a spoiled prince at the beginning, but you know, he has a sensitive side. He eventually grows and matures and becomes, you know, like pretty much your ideal man, cough cough. But you know, like because as the movies like kept going, like he just becomes more and more of a dumb jock, and it has no connection whatsoever to his character arc. It has no connection whatsoever to like the original characterization of the character. It's just more and more what, you know, people expect from his character, just because, you know, he looks that way and that's what people think he's like, based on like, you know, oh look, he's a god of thunder, he has a hammer and he has big muscles, you know.
Yeah, stereotypes are really easy, and I think that we fall back on. I mean, like it's the Pop-Tarts version of Thor. Like that's just what I like that fandom obsession, that fandom fixation on Thor and his Pop-Tarts, when he just literally ate a box of Pop-Tarts once, and literally it was an offhand comment that was mostly a joke, and the entire fandom was like, well, that's where the character of Thor's characterization starts, is at Pop-Tarts. And it's like you took like the least important thing about that character and sort of exploded it into something. And I feel like Pop-Tart Thor showed up for Ragnarok, and it was like really confusing and upsetting because it was like I was expecting evolution. And I think it's really interesting that we have this sort of like this double standard where we have like, you know, every single time a character has any kind of character development in the DCEU, it's called course correction. And anytime a character has any kind of character development or becomes different or something in the MCU, it's referred to as fixing it. Because I've seen a lot of people be like, well, I'm so glad they came in and they fixed Thor, and that's like that's one of and the MCU fandom is, I mean, like, I have seen it turn from something really cute and pure and fluffy into something big and dark and scary. But that's like one of the things that has made me the maddest, being in that fandom, is hearing that sort of like, well, I'm glad that those first two trash movies have been erased and now, you know, Thor is better now. And it's like, well, I mean, yeah, if you want him to have the same personality as every other MCU hero, sure, like that's him being fixed, but you've essentially fixed a large group of fans out of the fandom. And I mean, I think we really have to think about that. This idea that, like, you know, like by ejecting these minority fans, by ejecting even, like, you know, I think a lot of times ejecting marginalized fans gets celebrated by the main fan base. And that's a huge problem. Like, we shouldn't be looking at that and being like, well, they liked something different, so they should definitely not be part of this fandom anymore. And I'm so glad that they don't have anything anymore. Like, for me, it's like, allow me my corner. Jeez, like the rest of the MCU is getting more and more homogenized, and it's like, yeah, allow me 5 inches over here just to sit with my muscly son and enjoy my little soap opera, my little Asgardian soap opera, which has been, you know, blown completely out of the water. It's kind of over now.
Yeah. Okay. I kind of feel it. So, I mean, okay. Go ahead first.
Oh yeah, because I haven't had a chance to go. So for myself, so when I saw Ragnarok, I mistakenly watched it. So I watched Black Panther one night, Infinity War the next day, and then I went back to Ragnarok right after that. Horrible mistake. Oh my god! No one ever subject that to yourself. Oh my god. Because I went in, because obviously I came into Thor Ragnarok super late into the game. I know everyone who had liked it, and like I heard what Danielle said, and I'm like, okay, I'm probably not gonna like this. And I'm watching this movie after seeing Black Panther, which I thought was amazing, Infinity War, which I thought was really good. I'm watching Ragnarok, and I'm just like, oh my god, this is honestly, and no offense to anyone who likes this movie or likes the character or whatever, Thor Ragnarok is by far the absolute worst MCU movie ever. It literally treats the character like he's a fucking joke. Basically, the movie felt like an apology to people like, oh, sorry that you couldn't laugh at Thor every 2 seconds, so we're forgetting every other movie. The characters are still there, but they're all funny now, so you can laugh at them like you laugh at Spider-Man and Iron Man. And here you go, a brand new movie for you. So that way, all of you guys who love our comedies, you guys can just love this one and forget the other one. Which to me, it's just like, why? Like, I still don't understand the criticism of, oh, Thor was so boring before. What about him was boring? Like, he had character growth in the first film. In the second film, he was such a mature hero. He had learned his mistake. He learned from his mistakes, and that showed in almost every single scene in the movie. Granted, Thor: The Dark World had its issues. It did have a forgettable villain, yeah, sure. But in terms of Thor's characterization, that was probably some of the best we've seen of him in the entire MCU.
Yeah. That I can admit, actually. You know, despite me not liking the first and second Thor films, I can admit that Thor's character in the second movie was a lot more mature and a lot more grounded, as opposed to
exactly.
Yeah, I agree with you, Nick. It sucks that they just took that away.
Yeah, because he felt like he had finally matured into this guy who was like, by the end of the movie, when like even though it turned, spoiler alert if you haven't seen Thor: The Dark World, when he's talking to Odin, who really turns out to be Thor, and like basically says like I'm not ready to be king. That's such like a you were waiting for that moment for him to be humble. Like yes, and then in the entire movie, like you felt like he was kind of ready for that, but that leading up to that moment, like it felt like you wanted him to say yes, but like you're so proud of him for saying no. Like, like kind of like how Danielle is seeming as a son. You're almost like you're seriously you're seeing your child grow up and learn from their mistakes and to become the person you want them to be.
We raised him. Him. We're part of his family. We are Odin's sons. All of us. Like that's important to know. Like that's for me, that's what separates Thor from the rest of the Avengers, is sort of like we got to see this huge arc of growth. We got to see him be a young, shitty man and turn into a full-grown, adult who could handle these things and who could really be like a hero on the level of on the level of people, on the level of heroes that are not in this franchise, on the level of on the level of X-Men, on the level of people who stepped up and decided to save the world for unselfish reasons. Those kind of people. We saw Thor get turned into that person, and I think that bonded him to me really, really intensely. Like he's an important part of how I conceptualize a hero, especially on the big screen, because I think that's the first time that I saw a superhero that I was like, yeah, that guy, sure, okay, like I would follow him into the fire. That's absolutely the guy. I love the first Iron Man movie, but we all understand that, like, nobody really wants to follow Tony off of whatever cliff he's driving off of at this current moment. Like, even if you love him, you have to admit that you don't trust him because you're smart and you've seen what else he's done. Like, but that's like the charm of the character, and it's an interesting thing about Tony, but Thor should be the antithesis of that. Thor should be the guy who just sort of shows up and looks at Tony and goes, really? Like, that should be his role. His role should be, like, to come up and be like, okay, here's the thing. I could lightning you into dust. So you need to chill out, put down the alcohol, and figure out your shit. And that's something Thor could have done for this group. That's something Thor could have, but that's the thing, is that once he started being written by Whedon, he did what everybody else did, which was get really, 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 really flat. And he was just one thing, and what he was alien, foreign, and conceited. Well, that's it. Like, he was alien, foreign, and overpowered, and those are things that Joss really hates in a character, if we're being really honest. Especially the overpowered, but also, like, the alien and foreign, because he doesn't know what to do with it. It's not his lane, and he's never tried. All he does is appropriate shit.
If I can real quick. There's one thing.
That's the reason he hates Superman.
Yeah. There's one thing I want to bring up too, in bringing what you said about Joss and the way he chooses Thor. In both Avengers films, Joss purposely takes Thor out of the situations that are the most emotional for the characters and sends him off somewhere else entirely. Like in the first Avengers, like he's like fighting Hulk, and then he spends like half an hour looking for his hammer. And then in the second one, he has that weird like cave vision shirtless quest or whatever he was doing. And so he's forces away from the team again, and it's like in those moments like everything that the team itself is going through, he's not there for, because again, Josh doesn't know how to handle Thor and emotion.
Not only is Thor sent off in a corner in that film, not only is he sent off in a corner, this is what really pisses me off, is that if you read any of the behind the scenes stuff, Joss was fighting that scene in the cave the whole way through. Every cut that was made to that scene in the cave, every paring back of that scene for Thor, all of Thor's storyline was something that Joss fought from beginning to end. Like literally if you read the behind the scenes stuff, the cave stuff was like set up against the farm stuff. And he was championing the farm, and the studio was championing the cave, and he was fighting the ability for Thor to get his own subplot entirely for that entire film, at the cost of keeping, like, basically the only reason we got a minute of that cave was because the studio put a gun to the family's head and said, like, we'll take the whole farm. And that's the reason we have the cave, is because, like, he was like, well, I need the farm family, because, you know,
because
farm families, Russian families, I don't know, something about it.
Okay. In all fairness, I feel like we do have to talk about, like, the reason why Ragnarok was so well liked. Like,
can I talk about me for my first time seeing it?
Yes, do, please.
Okay. So, I know Al was talking about how he didn't see them in theaters. For me, I never saw any comic book movie in theaters until 2016. So I was watching everything on TV. So, anyways, I saw the first Thor movie and I was like, okay, I like the family stuff. That's interesting and complicated. And I wasn't really, like, a fan of the movie. I have this reaction to things where I just don't really get feelings, you know? Like, with X-Men, I got feelings, but, like, I don't know, when I saw Man of Steel, I didn't get feelings. When I saw, like, a bunch of things, I didn't get feelings. I was like, okay, like, I just have this reaction to things. I just watch it, and I'm like, okay. So I saw the first Thor movie, and I liked the family dynamic, and I was like, okay. And then I saw the second one, and it was funny, because the first movie I watched, I didn't like Jane, because it was like, mandatory straight love interest again. But by the second one, I don't know what it was, but I really liked them as a couple, and I think, like, I really liked that Thor was more mature now, and, like, his personality was just more likable and everything. And I thought, like, when I watched the first movie, I thought his character development, his transformation was kind of, not the transformation itself was rushed, because it was kind of the whole movie, but, like, the moment of transformation, like, that moment of that thing that happened. I don't know if we can spoil, but, like, maybe we can, because we're talking about Thor Ragnarok. So, like, when he just kind of, like, was like, okay, I'm gonna die, and then he got his hammer back, and I was just like, that's just it, like, it just happened like that. But anyways, so with the second one, though, I enjoyed it a lot more, and I liked him and Jane, and I thought it was really cute, and I liked the continuation of, like, his family stuff and everything. And honestly, I did not like Avengers. Like, nothing about that movie really appealed to me, to be honest. So it's neither here nor there with that movie. And yeah, with Ultron, he didn't really have much to do or anything. So I wasn't, like, a fan of the character himself, but, like, I guess I think I like the Dark World a lot more than other people do. But with Ragnarok, the first time when I saw the teaser trailer, I was convinced that this was going to be, like, fantastic, because, like, it just looked beautiful, and the music and, like, the cinematography, which is funny because they showed the cinematography was absolutely beautiful for that flashback scene that they showed in the trailer, but it's the only scene with beautiful cinematography, so it's like, you used the only thing you had. But I was like, well, this movie looks great, and I was, really expecting the dark colors and everything, because that's how it was really advertised, and it is Ragnarok, it is, like, the end of the world, like, one would expect a certain kind of tone. But I was like, you know what, the teaser looks good, so let's not pass judgment or anything. And then the next trailers came out, and then honestly the only trailer that appealed to me was the teaser trailer. After that, it just became more and more obvious what the movie was going to be like, and I was like, I don't need this in my life, to be honest. I'm going to watch Justice League and have a good time, and then after that I'm going to watch Ragnarok. Boy, was I mistaken. I never ended up seeing Ragnarok in theaters anyway, because I'm like, I've had enough pain this month. Honestly, we don't need anything else. Like, I'm not gonna hate this movie anyway. And I've honestly never hated an MCU movie. The only MCU movie I've hated was Captain America, the First Avenger, because I thought it was boring. And every other MCU movie, I either like it or I'm okay with it. But Ragnarok, just like on principle, I knew I was gonna hate it. I was like, I'm gonna hate this movie. Why would I do this? So then, like, my college showed it at like movie night thing, and I went because I'm like, it's free. I don't have to pay money for this. So I watched it fully prepared to hate it. I sat down. I was not like, maybe it'll be okay. I was like, you're gonna hate this movie. Get what you can out of it. If it has any connections to the rest of the MCU, get those. Pray for Bruce Banner, honestly. Just get what you can out of this thing.
Pray for Bruce Banner?
Yeah. And, it was what I expected, to be honest. And I thought the movie was going to be trash, but it wasn't trash. It was a good movie on its own. But in the franchise, yeah, it disappointed. It disappointed me. Not emotionally disappointed, because honestly, like, I was prepared for that. But it let down Thor as a character. It was just anticlimactic, because, it's called Ragnarok. You know, and this is basically my problem with the MCU. It's like, these are superhero movies. Like, it's supposed to be astounding. It's supposed to be spectacular. It's supposed to be legendary, basically. If all you want to do is just make action comedies, you don't have to be working with superheroes. You know? Like, the superhero genre, to me, means that you're gonna bring something, you know, like, bring something that is, like, spectacular, basically, and it does not live up to its name. If it wasn't called Ragnarok, I really probably wouldn't have had a problem with the small scale of it, but because it was called Ragnarok, and just, like, the knowledge of, like, what that means mythologically, it's like,
yeah,
there's a bar here, and you did not meet the bar, you know? And Bruce just keeps getting... Because this is like, if I had never seen The Incredible Hulk, I would not be thirsting for Bruce Banner to have, like, actual character and, like, a lot of screen time and character development and just the whole movie about Bruce Banner, to be honest. But I did see Incredible Hulk, and it was fantastic. And no one can ever... People call that movie mediocre. I'm like, mediocre where? That's, like, one of the best movies in the MCU, to be honest. And, like, Bruce Banner, like, deserves all the things. He deserves, like, so much character development. He deserves just, like, it's like they tried to give him something in this movie, but it's like, after having seen The Incredible Hulk, and not even just The Incredible Hulk, having seen Hulk, by Ang Lee, and The Incredible Hulk, like, both of those movies do him justice. And then, like, the fact that the MCU has not tried to do him justice since then, you know? And just, like, this movie was just anticlimactic, having been called Ragnarok, and it was just not fantastic. It was not spectacular. It was not jaw-dropping. It was just, like, you know, it was good for, like, being a movie, you know? But, like, as a Thor movie, considering what I have to compare it to, the Hulk movies that I have to compare it to, and the Thor movies that I have to compare it to, it was just disappointing, you know?
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing that really spins my head, is that, like, this is a good film. Like, I'm never gonna argue that Ragnarok was not a good film. That's where I sit. I think it was a good film. Technically, I think it was a good film execution-wise. I think that, you know, it hits all the right beats and it does all the things that it sets out to do. And, you know, because it accomplishes what it sets out to do, it does what it wants to do, it's still really technically a good film. I think as someone who's as a non-Thor fan, as someone who maybe didn't see the first two movies, this is a super enjoyable film, and you can watch it, you can enjoy it, and you can take it for what it is. But that isn't the job that the third part in a trilogy is meant to do. Like, it's just sort of like, it's so, a lot of it is that, for me, it's so indicative of where we are as far as like how collaboration on films works now. That's what's really frustrating to me, is that like we have basically an artist coming in and disrespecting the two artists that came before, and that kind of stuff really makes me take it personally, because I'm just sitting there like, how would I feel if this happened to me? How would I feel if someone came in and, you know, made jokes about the film that I made, like made the actual text of their film to satirize the film that I made and ignore everything that was done in the film that I made, and to come in and just sort of be like, well, since this is mine now, I'm just going to ignore everything that you did. And it's not the spirit of collaboration that you expect from three different films making the same movies. Like, it's not what I expect at all. And I think that, I don't know, it feels very self-focused. It feels very self-centered. It feels very self-indulgent. And I think that, you know, it's a lack of discipline. And I think that it's not for me. I do not like it. I don't think that it's the right direction to head in. I like the collaborative nature of these films. I like that an extended universe makes filmmakers work together. I like that Zack had to be involved in Wonder Woman because it was interlocking with his vision of Wonder Woman. I love that about, like, I think that's one of my favorite things about Wonder Woman, is that sense of these films sort of fitting together on a hinge, but still giving Patty her own vision for the film is really, really powerful. It's really, really important. And I think that the beginning of the MCU had that kind of feel, and now it just seems like every film director comes in and the ego takes over, and it's all about them, and it's all about their vision. It has nothing to do with anything that came before, or in this case, even worse, it mocks what came before. Like, that just seems really disrespectful to the filmmakers that made the last two films.
Yeah, I mean, I think I really do have to give, like if you put Ragnarok in the context of like the time that it came out in, rather than like and like as a standalone film, it, like what you said, it is a really good movie, and like I can understand why like this movie in particular would appeal to so many people, who are like not fans of the MCU, who are not fans of Thor, because it's not just the comedy. Like it's been praised for having like very, very strong political commentary about like imperialism and such, and I agree with it. Like, I agree that this film had a very good message, and that it absolutely accomplished that message. Like, some of the cinematography was absolutely stunning, some of the lighting that Waititi used was amazing, and like, yeah, on its own it was a really solid film. Like, for my experience of it, the thing is, I completely skipped out on watching this movie because I saw the poster and I immediately knew this is just gonna cause me pain. As someone who did really enjoy the first two Thor films, so I just completely skipped over it. But after seeing like how a lot of people I follow like on social media really, really enjoyed this film, mostly people who weren't like fans of DC because, you know, obvious reasons, but like a lot of people who like previously weren't interested in superhero movies, it wasn't like their main interest, it wasn't really on their radar, suddenly started being really excited about the Thor films, like about this film in particular, because of the strong messages that it held, because of like some of the things that included, some of the comedy stuff, the portrayal of like of Thor and Loki. Like, I can understand why a lot of people loved it. It was in its own right a fantastic film. Like, when I watched it for the first time, I went in with the expectations. I knew like what sort of things to look out for, what sort of things this movie was trying to do. And when I watched it, I did thoroughly enjoy it. Like, okay, you guys on this chat, like, some of you might remember that when I watched it, I was just really excited. Like, I was like, oh man, I really liked it. But then, like, yeah, after thinking about it in context of the Thor films, like, you can understand, like, if you're coming from it from the perspective of someone who's as a sequel, as like a closing to this trilogy of the Thor films, like, it's not a trilogy. like that's the tragic truth about it. It's just that this movie just completely shattered the illusion that that these movies have their own internal continuity. You know, like it's all well and good, like within the MCU, if you see the trajectory that like the MCU films in general have been on, like they've gravitated more and more towards the comedy, you know, despite like their movie subjects being like a bit more serious, like Civil War and I don't know, Civil War, but yeah, you know, and they try to tackle deeper subjects, but you know, they've also been leaning more and more into the comedy side of things, you know, like cracking quips every few seconds and stuff, and trying to make comic relief about everything. Like that's the thing about the MCU that people have pointed out, which is that like it thrives on this sort of self-deprecating humor, and like I think Thor is one of the most extreme examples of like leaning into that kind of self-parody and sort of like self-deprecating style of treating the superheroes. And like that's all well and good for Guardians of the Galaxy because, you know, it has its own internal continuity in that sense, but yeah, with Thor, like it just completely ruins that continuity because Thor, for the first two movies, was one of the characters that actually played it straight, like it played it completely straight. And you know, like that was something that I really, really appreciated. I really liked the original tone of it. Like yeah, I know some people found it a bit boring, some people found it a bit bland, and yeah, I can agree with those, but like in the spirit of like, you know, closing up a trilogy, of like making sure that, you know, if I just wanted to watch the Thor movies, I could just watch that character and I could just love that character. Like you can't do that anymore with Ragnarok, and I think that's like the most upsetting thing for me in hindsight, having watched it. Like watching Ragnarok on its own, like if you have that kind of nebulous knowledge of like, oh, this is the character that Thor is, this is who Loki is, this is all the history of the character, this is like, oh, this is what he's gone through with Odin, because obviously they make references to previous events in the movie, like in the dialogue and such. Like if you already have all that knowledge but somehow you've forgotten their characterization and you've conveniently like have zero feelings towards those original characters, yeah, you'll enjoy this movie a lot. That's where I came from when I finally watched the movie, and that's why I enjoyed it, you know. And like luckily you don't need too much background information for it, but if you want to enjoy the MCU as a whole, if you want to be like a positive, if you want to approach it from a positive perspective, it's really hard because, you know, you try your hardest to like the Thor movies and you can find all the good things in the first two Thor movies, and then the third movie comes and it has its own good things, but its good things are in direct opposition to what was good about the first two movies. You know, that continuity is gone. It's kind of, yeah, difficult as a fan.
Yeah. I think for me the worst thing that movie did wasn't even just like making Thor dumber, it was taking away his empathy, because like people died right in front of him, like his like slaughtered. Asgard was destroyed and he just had this dopey grin the whole time, and I'm just like, you could literally make him dumb if you want, but to destroy his empathy is just to destroy what makes him like
his character.
He's not human, is he? But like
yeah,
that emotion, you know, like it destroys any hope of him being just like a person with a heart, you know? Because if people die in front of him, and if like his homeland blows up in front of his eyes and he doesn't even like shed a tear, like how does that make me feel about him, you know?
How can he be a hero in my eyes in that sense?
Thor is made of feelings, and this is what everybody seems to keep forgetting, is that like Thor feels through his films. Like he, even in the first film, when he starts out in dick mode, he's still full of feelings. He's full of anger, he's full of resentment, he's full of pride, he's full of he's full of all sorts of different really intense feelings. From the moment we see him on screen, like he's the guy who's not ashamed to like throw his fist into the air and scream at the end of the battle, and everybody in the MCU is too cool for him, but that's like the cool and refreshing thing about Thor is that Thor doesn't give a shit how cool you are. It's not about cool for him. It's about just, you know, going with whatever feeling he's feeling. And I think that in terms of empathy, like, that's what we were teaching him in the first film. We were teaching him to think about other people. We were teaching him to take a minute and take other people's emotions into account. And even if we hadn't, Thor still feels so deeply about his family, so deeply. And the idea that we let his father die without a huge giant breakdown, that we, you know, had all of these really large moments. Like, he's literally sitting in a prison in Ragnarok at some point, and he's like, yeah, super sad about stuff. Like, really?
Yeah.
Are you, though? Because I don't think, you don't look sad to me, and this isn't the way that Thor deals with things. The way that Thor deals with things is actually 1,000,000 times more healthy than that, which is to sit down and actually grieve things and feel those feelings and process those feelings on the face, whether it's convenient or not. And he's just sitting in prison with nothing to do, just kind of being like, yeah, haha, guess I'll have nightmares about this for a couple years. Like, okay, like, that's cute and millennial and everything, but it doesn't really fit him as a character. Like, he's a very, very emotive character. He has a lot of feelings. This movie, the things that happened in this movie should have broke his heart 100 times.
Mm-hmm.
That should have been clear from this outset. And it's very weird to me, and it's very, like, it throws everything off to just sort of have him, like, giggle through this film while terrible things are happening around him. Like, I think that if you don't know Thor very well, it can come across like a coping mechanism, but if you do know Thor, it looks bizarre, and it's confusing because you know this character pretty well, and he's big feelings. He cries. I mean, we don't let him cry because it's still an MCU film, but, like, we get him near tears in every single film. He has a moment where he's, like, you know, trembling into the camera, and it's beautiful, and I love it. And it's one of my favorite things about him is that he sort of, like, bends that masculine status quo about whether or not heroes are allowed to grieve. Thor grieves, and it's really sad that we took Odin from both Thor and Loki, and we didn't give them time to feel that, because Odin's sons have huge big emotions that ruin the world, and that is, like, one of their things. Like, half of the reason that they keep destroying everything is because they feel something big.
Because big jock muscle men are not allowed to have tears without
Yeah.
That was, like, a thing for me. Like, when I was watching this movie, I kept waiting for him to have a breakdown, because, like, that was, like, a thing. Like, in the first one, he was so emotionally riled up that he was like, let's go to Jotunheim and murder everyone. And then he flipped a table, and he's doing all these things, you know, like, this guy is, like, super, like, I didn't even register it until you said it like that, Danielle. Like, I didn't even register, like, oh, yeah, Thor is a really emotional guy. But, like, yeah, while I was watching the movie, I kept waiting for him, like, when the hammer, no, not the hammer. Yeah, okay, when Odin died, I thought, like, it was gonna be this, like, a big emotional thing, but then Hela showed up, and they weren't even sniffling. They were just like, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "You guys aren't gonna cry? Like, not Thor's gonna cry or anything? Like, you're not gonna be choking through your tears asking her who she is or whatever." Like, and then his hammer got destroyed, and then he was just, like, all chill about it, and he was in prison, and he was being all chill about it, and I'm just like, Thor would be bawling, okay, stomping around, scowling away, okay, thrashing all over this jail cell. Like, I'm waiting for, like, this strong emotional reaction here that I'm used to from him, and I'm just like, it's just not happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's like, honestly, like, for me, like, I can't call this a good movie and be like, oh, well, if you just don't think about the other two Thor films and just think of this one as its own. But the thing is, it's not. Like, there are previous films before this. I can't just sit there and ignore the other ones. Unless this one specifically said, oh, this is a reboot. Then no, I'm not. Why am I going to sit there and ignore the character who has had characterization in every other previous film and I'm just supposed to just pretend like, oh, just forget about those films. This is something different. It's part of a franchise. It's part of, even though it's not a trilogy, like it's still kind of carry on from the Thor: The Dark World. Even though people kind of want to forget that, like Thor, like Odin actually being Loki, that's from the Dark World. Like, even though it's not a direct sequel and it ignores Thor's characterization in pretty much every way, like for me, I can't sit there and be like, oh, well, if I just pretend that Thor 1 and Thor 2 aren't being addressed, then I can call it a good movie. No, in my eyes, it's building as part of a franchise. That's like saying, oh, I don't know, can't even think of a good example. Well, here, like, let's say, to compare to the DCEU Justice League. Oh, well, if you just pretend that the entire DCEU before Justice League doesn't exist, then Justice League is a good film. No, in my opinion, it's still a shitty film, and it's part of a franchise. I'm not going to forget that just because it's a shitty film and it ignores everything before that. Like, I can't do that. And no offense to Gene, because I know you brought up some very fair points, as I completely disagree. I can't call this a fantastic film, and it's like, oh, well, it's more of its own thing. Well, it's part of a franchise, and I can't just do that because I have to judge it on its merits, and it's part of a franchise. I can't just judge it as like a singular film, because I think it completely butchers everything about the character. And for me, some of the biggest things were like, I think some of the most important aspects of the Thor franchise was Thor and his relationship with Jane. And Marvel and Taika made it feel pretty clear that they didn't want anything more to do with Natalie Portman. And she was like, okay, well, it's not like you guys really cared all that much about me anyway. So it was like they just found a reason to get her out of the universe. And I think that's so stupid, because I think she was one of the emotional hearts of the entire Thor franchise. And to just toss her aside like she's nothing, and you can say, oh, well, and it ends up being entirely in space. Hey, they brought Natalie Portman to fucking Asgard. Like, she was there for adventures too. Like, why couldn't she have been part of it? Like, to me, it just, everything about Thor Ragnarok just felt like a huge slap in the face to everyone who was a fan of the character in the previous films in any way. Like, for me, like, and I've seen some people say, like, oh, well, again, like, I went into it thinking, oh, it basically was like a soft reboot. Well, the thing is, it wasn't. It's still building off of previous films, and it's still leading up to another part of the franchise in Infinity War. So for me, it's just frustrating when people try to say, and again, no offense to Eugene, because I know you brought up some really fair points. And I'm getting a little passionate about it, but it just, for me, it's just, I can't just sit there and call it a fantastic movie on its own merit, because it is still part of a franchise, and it disrespects everything about the franchise beforehand. So it just,
the thing that's hard for me really is like the fact that it's sort of like if you compare it to Justice League, I think that that's kind of where I am, is I'm sort of like looking at it and I'm saying, well, here's the thing, like, even if I hadn't seen a single DCEU film before Justice League, I still would have sat in Justice League and been like, why did this terrible movie get greenlit? How did anyone see this cut and say, this is a good movie, we should release it? Like, that's where I stand with Justice League. Like, I watched it and I was like, wow, like, there are rookie mistakes in this film. Like, a major studio film shouldn't look like this. Whereas, like, when I compare that to Ragnarok, I can kind of say, like, well, you know, it doesn't do, and I agree, Nick, it doesn't do what it's meant to do, which is actually pay tribute to the events that came before it. But at least it comes together and makes like sort of like an understandable narrative. There are parts of it that, the worst part of Ragnarok, I think, for me, is that there are parts of it that are enjoyable. Like, there are parts of it that there are parts of it where I was like, yes, you know? I mean, like, I really did enjoy parts of this film. I mean, I think that the 30 seconds for which they actually let Tom Hiddleston act are brilliant. I miss him so much all the time. They don't ever let him do anything but twirl his mustache anymore. And when he's not twirling his mustache, he's one of the most brilliant actors I've ever seen at his age. I can't even like articulate how Tom Hiddleston makes me feel on the screen when he's, you know, actually given a chance to do what he can do. And he, like, you know, he has a few moments in this film that are just wonderful and heartbreaking and everything I wanted for Loki. But, you know, it's enjoying those moments in between being having a whole franchise be sort of disrespected. And that's hard because, like, at least with Justice League, like, I can kind of, like, compartmentalize. I can say, like, I really love these Ray Fisher scenes, but, you know, obviously those were shot by a different director, and I can say, like, there's one director's vision, there's the other director's vision. I can really, like, slice it in half and get the stuff I like out, whereas, like, Ragnarok is just sort of all together. It's just like a giant soup. You can't really take one ingredient out. And there are things that I liked. Like, I thought some of the movie was pretty funny. And, you know, I've tried to let it grow on me. I really have. I've watched it 3 times so far. And every single time, like, you know, I hit the same things where I'm like, why do we do it this way? I don't know. But it's hard because I don't necessarily want to call this a bad film. I think that doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't feel correct because the film comes together. The film has finished CGI. The film doesn't have one of the characters looking like a freaking gremlin. The film doesn't cut entire subplots that were meant to be there with female characters. The film doesn't like feel like it was cobbled together. It feels like a very cohesive vision from one director who wanted to do a specific thing, and that specific thing is something I disagree with very much. And those two feelings, I'm trying to separate them just because I want to be really honest about, like, the fact that this film works, just not for me. I think it works for people who hate Thor, which hurts my feelings, and I think it's kind of shitty. I think it's a shitty thing for the MCU to do to Thor. I also kind of saw it coming, because it's the same way that DC seems to feel about Superman, is that they're too good, they're too pure, they're too in riot against the status quo, to be honest. They both undermine insecure masculinity that is driving the superhero franchises right now. That's what they do, and that is threatening. And that's the reason that both Thor and Superman have been up on the chopping block over and over and over again for the last, I don't know,
20 years.
Yeah, at least 20 years. Like, that's the reason that nobody can get a Superman film made that everyone agrees on. That's the reason that Thor is at the bottom of the box office charts for every single MCU movie. Every time he has a film come out, it ranks bottom of the box office charts. It does not make the money that Marvel wants it to make. And the reason for that has a lot to do with who Thor is. And Thor has a lot of feelings. Thor's a sensitive guy. Thor has an entire story that really revolves around a woman, and which he fixed with giant air quotes, all of that. And I think it's a detriment to the entire franchise. I think it's a detriment to the Thor story, and I think that in the long run, it's going to have an overall negative effect on the franchise, and that's really sad.
Yeah,
I think unless this world goes to shit in the next, like, 10, 20 years, which, I mean, high chances at this point, I feel like the legacy of the MCU and, like, taking this comedy approach just won't be very good, you know what I mean? It won't go down as having a lasting impact.
And that's why,
I think that's a consequence of what I was saying.
I'm not seeing anything meaningful.
Yeah.
I think that's a consequence of what I was saying before, with them not trying to make a superhero movie, just making action comedies.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I want to say real quick too, despite all of my issues with Ragnarok, and I personally still can call it a bad film. I just don't think it's very good. That being said, even though I thought she was a little over the top at times, even then, oh my fucking god, Cate Blanchett.
I did not like. Okay. We're gonna have. Okay, I think that she phoned it in pretty obviously. I don't think she was given good dialogue. her CGI was awful. So yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about that.
Okay. Minor complaint that people are gonna fight me on. People are gonna fight me on this, but the way Waititi directs his women to give their power walks just feels really over the top to me, and I can't believe it no matter how badass I know the woman in question is. Like, you know, like that moment where Valkyrie is walking towards the screen and doing her complete power walk, like the moment itself is intense as heck, and Tessa Thompson is intense as heck, but like the walk, just no. And like, especially Cate Blanchett, like what you were saying, like she was really hamming it up for this character. Like the character itself was pretty interesting, and like, you know, there were parts of her performance which were great because we know she's a great actress, but like it just felt very over the top and kind of corny to me. And maybe that was the intention because that's like the general tone of Watiti's films. But you know, in terms of making her like an intimidating villain, like it just went a bit. It was just a bit overboard.
I agree. I think there was some interesting moments there, like with the themes, like with her giving the whole backstory of Odin and how he kind of like, how do you say, cast her aside, you know? Because, I mean, he does have a terrible history with his kids, you know, of making bad decisions with them, you know? So, like, with Thor, I don't know, you could say, oh, he didn't discipline him enough or whatever, I don't know.
Bad
with
dad
Loki
Odin.
not telling him, with Loki not telling him the truth and kind of accidentally setting up his sons to be rivals, and with Hela, like, casting her aside when he was done with the conquering part of his life, you know? So, like, that was interesting. But, yeah, I agree with Jean. It was just a little bit too much, kind of.
There's a very thin line between dramatic and melodramatic.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I still think she had some pretty good scenes. I mean, I think some of her worst scenes are with Karl Urban. And, oh, my God, how do you waste Karl Urban in a movie?
Oh, my God. Yes?
Oh, which one's
my
Karl
God.
Urban?
Like, he was, like, literally the worst part of the movie. Like, what
Karl
what
Urban
was
is
his
the
purpose?
guy who, he's like her second
Her
hand.
only henchman.
Wait, which one is Karl Urban again?
He was, like, her henchman.
From Lord of
He
the
was
Rings.
her-
He was the
guy.
he was the guy who, like, took place of Heimdall when Heimdall went to go help Asgard.
He was the one in the beginning
Oh,
who
the
was
guy
messing
with
around
the
with the
machine
shape weight.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, the guy with the machine gun.
Oh yeah, that made no sense. Why does he?
He's so talented.
I remember of him is that he's that guy with the machine guns. That's all I remember. Him. That guy with the machine guns.
This is the thing I keep coming back to too, is that like everybody in this film franchise is so talented and so wasted. Like nobody gets to do what they get to do. Like we could have given that character something that was an arc that was like not nonsensical, and Karl Urban would have kicked it in the ass because we know him. We know that, you know, he put me into half a coma during the Star Wars films when I was just all of a sudden like, he resurrected this actor. Like,
Oh, you mean
how is
Star
he the same exact person as
You mean Star
Bones?
Trek?
Yes, sorry,
Yeah,
Star
okay.
Trek. Yes.
I was like,
How is he Bones? How is he just suddenly Bones? Like he just became him. He comes on screen, he's just all of a sudden like Forrest
eyeballs
DeWitt
are gonna melt.
was alive again, and I was like, I mean, like, he's brilliant. He's brilliant. You know, Blanchett is brilliant. Everybody is so good and doesn't get to do what they need to do, which is the emotional work. There's no emotional work to do in these films, and no wonder it feels like everyone's wasted. I mean, like, what if we actually gave this female villain depth, and we actually gave her a reason to mourn this situation, and we didn't just make her like a mustache twirling, you know, cape flicking, queer coded bullshit villain again, and we said like, what if she's like really, really, really screwed up? Like, what if we actually explored the way that she's authentically screwed up, in the way that we gave Loki a minute to explore how he was authentically screwed up by Odin? And
Yeah.
this idea that, like, you know, I mean, if you want to make your whole film about colonization, you can explore how colonization hurts the colonizers. You can explore how colonization hurts the colonized. But we don't talk about hurt in this film. And that's the thing, is that, like, how can you have a film that's themed around colonization and not talk about the violence that's happening? And just be like, yeah, it's terrible, you know? Like, everything's just so bad because of the Odins. Like, everybody's, you know, just, Odin's family has just screwed us up for generations. Well, what does that look like? Waititi, what does that look like? You know, give us some actual blood. Like, if you're gonna slaughter an entire people, it can't be bloodless. You don't get to destroy half of Asgard, have Hela come in and, you know, slaughter beloved characters, and then say, oh yeah, well that just happened. No, it has to have blood, and that's the thing. I mean, that's the thing that Snyder has taught us about these films by deconstructing them, is like, without the blood, it's meaningless. And he never lets anybody emotionally bleed. Loki isn't bleeding, Thor isn't bleeding, Hela isn't bleeding, you know, the random citizenry of Asgard aren't even bleeding. They're just window dressing. And I think that undermines the theme. Like, everybody was talking about this thematic resonance of having colonization as like a backdrop for Asgard. And I think that idea is brilliant. I think that idea is amazing. Anytime you deal with a monarchy, you're dealing with themes that involve colonization, but you have to go all the way or not go at all. And I don't feel like he went all the way. I feel like it was sort of like a glib hat tip to the negative effects of colonization, but we never really see what that is. No one's threatened by this. No one's looking at this and being like, oh, you know, like, and that's the thing, is that, like, when you don't threaten your audience, you dodge that backlash, but you also have no effect on them in the long run. Everyone's going to talk about how great Ragnarok was for a couple of years, and then the next shinier MCU film is going to replace it, and there's going to be no lasting impact. And that's what's really tragic about it. I mean, at least Thor is going to last. At least Thor is going to be something that you open up later and you go, oh my god, there's a lot of gender in here. Oh my god, there's a lot of really interesting Shakespearean overtone in here. Oh my god, like, there's actual character development. Like, I really do think that, like, those early MCU films are going to last. I mean, Iron Man is one of the best comic book films that had ever been made at that time. That's something. That's huge. That was a big thing. But it took everyone seriously. And I guess that's just not something we're allowed to do anymore. And it's, I don't know, like, Ragnarok kind of felt like the death of it, because Thor was the last port on this journey of sort of like just sacking everything that mattered about the MCU characters.
And that's like,
I'm really desolated about this. I'm sorry. That was intense, but I'm super sad.
Well, I think like, and you kind of touched on it too, and just how this movie, like, within like less than a minute, kills off like 3, I would say, fairly important characters to the Thor franchise with the Warriors 3, and treats them as if like they're nothing, as if they're just random, like, citizen casualties.
NPCs.
It just, I don't. There's a lot of creative decisions made in this film. I don't know if they were entirely Taika's, or if there was a more Feige, or if there was some in between or whatever. But for me and what I was able to get out of Ragnarok, I wanted to like this film. Like that first trailer, like what or Rebecca brought up. Like, I just enjoyed that teaser trailer. I'm like, hey, like, this actually looks like it could be like a fun movie. Like, I enjoyed the other 2 films, even though the second one had some problems with the villain and other stuff. But I still had fun with it. And also seeing Thor Ragnarok after Infinity War, where actually Infinity War is, when it comes to Thor, it's like a balance of his character pre Ragnarok and his character in Ragnarok. It feels like an okay balance, like a tolerable balance of the two.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, watching, like, Infinity War, like, I wasn't nearly as angry at, like, watching the characters. I still felt like the Russo brothers, to an extent, got who Thor was supposed to be prior to Ragnarok. And because they still had to pick up the pieces of Ragnarok, so they had to, like, deal with some of that. But
he got emotions for a second.
I know, like, you actually felt like the loss of his people for a second. Like, in Ragnarok, like, oh, his dad dies. Oh, whatever. Like, oh, his sister's the big bad's killing everyone. Oh, whatever. Like, what? No. Like, I think one of the most powerful scenes in any MCU film is in Thor the Dark World, where Thor goes to talk to Loki, and Loki's putting on this facade, and then Thor's like, no, show me, like, the real you. And then you see Loki's destroyed this room. You've never seen Loki more broken in the entire franchise. And that was for Chris and it was just Chris and Tom. Like, they kicked ass in that scene, and that was just all emotion. And you seriously you felt that lack of emotion, that lack of care for the characters in Ragnarok, and it hurts to say because, like, obviously at this point in the MCU, I'm not nearly as passionate about the films anymore. Like, Thor burned me, Spider-Man burned me, Guardians of the Galaxy burned me, Civil War burned me. I stopped caring about these people in these films. But then, like, hi. Hey, hey, Fatma.
I'll say hi.
Hi. So obviously we're still talking about Ragnarok. We're about like an hour and a half in now. It's okay. So for those of you who are new listeners, with this being our first Bitter Geeks podcast, joining us is one of our members of the DC Films podcast, Fatma. So Fatma, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, as I already kind of did.
Hi guys, I'm Fatma and I'm Awesome Gotham on Tumblr.
And thank you for joining us. So we're kind of in the middle of our discussion. So if you want to kind of throw in your thoughts on Thor Ragnarok and what your overall opinions of him in the MCU and all that stuff, if you want to go ahead.
Oh no, you finished the point that you wanted to say, and then I'll go.
Oh no, it's okay. You can go right ahead. I was kind of I lost track of what I was saying.
That's the right way to say it. My brother is in love with that movie, and he absolutely adores. Is he called Krog or
the Rock?
The guy that springs out of rocks, something along those lines. And he absolutely loves him, and he's a Marvel person. Not my baby brother, my other brother. But when I watched the movie, I don't get what's appealing about it at all.
Thank you.
Like, it's just like I get that people might enjoy the colourfulness and the brightness and the comedy, but if you're gonna name it Ragnarok and based off, the lore and the myth of
the mythology,
it's not a light, go-hearted, movie. And from what I hear about the comics and what I know the comic book readers go through in terms of the story and how intense it is and how serious it is, it does not translate into this movie. And I just watch it and I'm just like, Thor has become a joke. That majestic god who could literally wipe you out is now a joke, and I don't find him threatening. Hell, Slipknot could beat Thor in my view from that movie. Joking. That's just like a little joke that people have. But yeah, it doesn't make sense because and then in the continuity, didn't Thor have to have his hammer in order to fight in Infinity War? But in Ragnarok, it was trying to say that Thor didn't need his hammer and that he is the god of lightning or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I totally forgot about that. Yeah.
That he wasn't a god.
Like, wasn't the whole thing about Thor that he wasn't a god? They're just beings from another dimension who have like a different lifespan and maybe powers.
It's really weird for Odin to just be like, "Yeah, are you the god of?" And we're like, "You're not the god of anything."
Yeah, that was like a thing for me because like I really liked that scene. I really liked the I don't know, how do you say it, the astral plane scenes with Odin. Like, that was one of the few things about the movie that I really enjoyed, like the ambiance of that and like the drama of it, like with the drum and just like zooming in slowly. Like, I love that stuff, and every time it happened I was like, oh, thank goodness, something good is happening now. So like when Odin was like, what are you, the god of hammers? And I was like, I love that, but he's not a god, but I love that, so I'm just going to enjoy what I can at this point. So yeah, it's kind of a problem, but like, eh.
Like, I get that it can be enjoyable as, you know, just, you know, to watch it and laugh. But as a superhero movie that, you know, with a superhero of that caliber, it doesn't really deliver, in my opinion.
Well, also, if you're taking away his hammer, like, taking away his hammer isn't about taking away the hammer. It's not about him having the hammer or not having the hammer. It's about his worthiness, and the whole idea of worthiness is scrubbed out of this movie. Like, in order to be worthy, you know, he needs to... Honestly, the whole idea of destroying the hammer in the first place is very silly to me, because it's not the point of the hammer. The hammer isn't something that, like, we should be like, oh my god, they destroyed the hammer, like, they're very powerful. No, the hammer is a mystical object that theoretically should not be able to be destroyed. It should be magical enough that it's not like a thing that gets destroyed. The way that Thor loses the hammer is thematic. You take the hammer away from Thor when he's fucking up. It's awesome. It's a great contingency. Like, it's basically just, you know, and how interesting would it have been to have him not be worthy for a film? You know, how interesting would it have been to just take that hammer from him in the organic way that it's taken from him and have him make a journey to be worthy again. And that's, you know, like failing his entire kingdom and letting a terrorist take over would be a great way for him to lose worthiness. Like, this is a fixable problem, but instead we just sort of, I don't know, there's something about like everything needs to be very impressive, and it's very impressive to destroy the hammer instead of just, you know, taking the organic route and just being like, okay, well, we want to make Thor unworthy so we can take the hammer from him. How do we do that? Like, that would have been character work, and we're not worried about character work. We're worried about what the violence looks like.
Audiences can't think for themselves anymore, Danielle. What are you thinking?
I'm
being a foolish fool.
Like, the writers need to think about these things, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just, I don't know, I feel like everything's just really straightforward. Like, oh yeah, how to show strong, okay, destroy hammer. You know, it's like no.
And that was the only impressive thing she did, by the way.
Just saying.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, but you've got a movie actress of the caliber of Cate Blanchett, right? And they just underutilized her so much. With that, you know, character and how you made her look at the end. She was a joke. I did not... How is she a villain, guys?
Also, like, what that fire
is there a villain in this movie?
What the heck?
At least I can say with Cate Blanchett, at least it looked like she was having fun. Like, beyond that, I mean, I do think she was wasted. Like, there's so much more they could have done with her. Like I feel like she was just there for the sake of the name, like the name Cate Blanchett.
Didn't she do it for her kids?
I don't know. Did she?
They thought, yeah, she did it because her kids thought it would be cool or something.
I mean, I think she was cast in order to look really good in the outfit, and that's terrible. And that's the worst case scenario for an actress. I never want to hear that she was cast because of how she looks. It's not about how she looks. It's about her capacity to do whatever she needs to do. And she didn't need to do anything in this film. She just needed to walk around and cackle. Like, boring. Like, it's such a waste of her. Like, you know, I mean, we were just rewatching the Hobbit films. and like having to lay down after watching a Cate Blanchett scene in which she had like 3 words of dialogue. Because her presence is just glowing and ruminating, and you're just like sitting there like, oh my god, like she could tear this whole place apart, and we know by the way she's looking at the camera, like and she has that power, she has that ability. They didn't even need to give her good dialogue. All they had to do was let her be her, and it seems like all of that was clamped down on. All of that was just sort of like, well, you know, there's no opportunity. Maybe she didn't really know what the character was about, because we sure as hell don't know what the character's about. We don't know much about the character at all. Like, all we know is that, like, she shouldn't be on the throne of Asgard, but we really didn't give any good reasons. Like, half of the thing was
color palette, and so she's evil.
Yeah, I mean, like, she's Slytherin, so she's gotta go. But that's the thing, is that, like, it's just a movie about Thor's journey to get his throne back for reasons I can't really figure out necessarily. Like her evil is arbitrary, his right to the throne is arbitrary, and a lot of the conversations they have about that are less than complicated. He doesn't even ask her about her point of view, and that's so un-Thor. Thor's a talker now. I mean, now Thor's a talker. He shows up to a fight and he's like, hey, for the record, why are we doing this? Can you explain to me what's going on? And like, it's his sister. Like this is a huge moment for him. Like, yeah, honestly, exactly. If I added a sister to Thor's story, the first thing that I would do is have him break down and, you know, get excited because he loves having family. He would have been like, oh my god, I'm so glad you're back. How can we heal this rift? This will be so great. We're a bigger family now. Everything's beautiful. And like, it's the same thing. It's the same kind of tone-deaf bullshit as Joss having Thor have throwaway lines like he's adopted. Like, I'm sorry. No, Thor loves his people. He loves his family. His family is number one. And the idea that he would just be like, well, you know, Loki did bad things, so he's not associated with me. Nope. Thor's taking that on. He's taking Hela on. He's taking all of Odin's bullshit on. He's taking that all on, and he's going to have to process it. How much more traumatic and wonderful would this movie have been for him if we'd actually let him feel any of that?
They just deleted his emotions, to be honest. Like, every natural reaction he would have had was gone.
Yep.
We got a glimpse of that in Infinity War, and like, look, it made him the best character in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just a tiny glimpse of that like heroic Thor. You know, we got him being selfless. We got him like caring about people. We got a few seconds of him, like, you know, grieving, albeit silently and alone, but like grieving over his losses. Like, that was some of the most powerful moments, most genuine moments in the film for me, and it really, really sold Thor. And like, yeah, as I said, Thor was like the best thing about that movie, and I don't think anyone can disagree with that, really.
It like reassured me that he's not dead. I was like watching Infinity War, and I was like, Thor is still alive. He's not dead. Taika Waititi did not destroy him.
He's thriving.
He's still here. It's not over. There's still hope.
And like, wasn't the storyline with that girl from the Valkyrie? Yeah, I don't. Guys, I'm really bad with Marvel names. Remember Green Goblet?
Yeah.
Is it? What's her name?
Valkyrie.
I feel like she could have been used a lot more. There was a backstory that she had that was really, really interesting, but it felt like it was just brushed over.
Yeah, that's the thing too. She doesn't have a name.
What's her name?
She doesn't have one. They called her Valkyrie for the whole film. We never find out what her actual freaking name is. Like, it's just.
So I'm not stupid then. Maybe I
could be.
No, you didn't forget anything. It's just omitted. It's so ugly.
It could be mysterious, but they did not play it as mysterious. They just played it as there's no name right now.
They played it as we don't care. They played it as like, oh, well, nobody asked, so we don't know what her name is.
And it could have been a mysterious thing. It could have been a thing of like, what's your name?
It could have been a character arc. It could have been a character arc, but no, we're not doing that today.
Yeah, it really could have been a character. It could have been a thing of like Thor trying to get close to her and her like not wanting to reveal anything about herself.
Didn't they wipe her LGBT?
Oh yeah. They just
Yeah,
like, Valkyrie's bisexual, but actually she's not.
Yeah, she had a girlfriend before, but then they just kind of like there was a scene where she did kind of mention that she was in a relationship with another woman, but they kind of deleted it out of the final cut of the movie.
That's fake representation, guys. Fake.
Wait, but guys, but Kevin Feige just said they're adding 2 new LGBTQ characters to the franchise. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
What do you mean new? New what? Like new as in existed before? There had been before, or what?
Yes, you do.
Who are these characters?
One of the characters is gonna come out as pansexual, and then they're gonna say that they're attracted to Rocket the raccoon.
I mean, a lot of people find him attractive, though. Not me, but like, you know, people.
Yeah, no, listen, one of the characters is gonna come out as pansexual and say, oh, I'm pansexual, so it's totally okay for me to be attracted to Rocket the raccoon in universe, and let's just express this attraction because it's okay because I'm pansexual, I'm in love with.
Because that's what pansexual means, right?
Yeah,
that's what pansexual means. It's like being attracted to aliens and objects.
Isn't that what Solo did? Like, I haven't seen the film, but isn't that like what happened in the new Star Wars movie?
Yeah, I was noticing if you guys noticed.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
What? In The Last Jedi?
No, in Solo.
In Solo.
I haven't seen
I haven't
it, but
seen that, so I can't.
It's like,
really say.
Lando's pansexual, so he can fuck a robot.
Are they actually dating? No, actually, don't spoil. I don't want to know.
They said that Han Solo was pansexual.
No.
It was Lando.
Oh. Childish Gambino's character.
Yeah.
Don Glover.
Donald Glover.
Yeah.
Well.
I guess Billy D. Williams told him that he was pansexual, and then, like, I guess that the way that we decided that came through was his ability to fuck robots, which is really interesting, and, like, you know, not at all, like, stop using the word, guys. Like, if you want a word, it's called a paraphilia, and it has nothing to do with your sexuality. It's just you're weird. You're just weird. Sorry. You're not LGBT, you're just weird. Well, you know how the Black Widow movie is definitely a thing that happened, so I absolutely trust him on everything.
Black Widow?
Okay, can I just say something?
He's been saying they're making a Black Widow movie for probably about 10 years now. Oh yeah, we're in on that. We're talking about that. Oh yeah, that's totally gonna happen.
Can I say something? Like, this is Feige, right?
Yeah, go.
Why does Feige, like, literally, like, his eyes, they just look scary to me? Am I the only person that thinks this? I think his eyes look scary. That's just me. Is that me, though?
It's your smart girl radar.
Like, his eyes, I don't know.
It's your modern women's smart girl radar. You can tell, you know, that when it comes from within.
I don't understand how people can call him their Lord and Savior, because, like, Zack Snyder is an actual genius and he's my Lord and Savior. What has Kevin Feige done? Like, I don't know.
He's made a lot of money.
That's it?
I mean, I think that's where it comes from. He made so much money. I mean, if you listen to MCU fans, that's what we're talking about, is that his ability to make money is absolutely an asset to the MCU and the most important thing that can happen with that franchise. So,
okay, he's not even creatively working on things. How does he earn respect? You know, like, I don't get that.
Nick,
you think they would be hero worshipping, like, you think they would be calling the Russo brothers their Lord and Savior, but, like, they're calling Feige that, and it's like, Feige doesn't do anything other than just, like, I don't know.
So maybe that.
I don't know. I do think he's a little more involved than just, like, being a producer. Because on certain films he is, like, more involved than others, but yeah, I mean, he is. I mean, I do think it's weird to call him the Lord and Savior of MCU. Like it's one thing. Like so, like when we as Zack Snyder fans do it, we do it like with like a wink to it. Like we're not doing it. We're like seriously like worshiping at the altar of Zack Snyder. But when MCU fans do it, it's like a literal like obsession with the guy.
Don't invalidate my beliefs, Nick. I still worship at the altar of our Lord and Savior Zack Snyder. Okay, yes, continue.
No, but I was just saying, like, honestly, like, it's so hard. Like, no offense to fans of the MCU, but, like, just looking at their behavior lately, I'm just like, why was I ever associated with them? Like, some of them are just so toxic, and it's just, like, and the conversations, like, it's like, first of all, 90% of the conversations are either about Bucky or about Loki. It's not even about the quality of the films at all. Secondly, it's like anytime they are talking about the films, it's just talking about how hot Chris Evans looked in one scene, or like how cute Groot was. It's like, yeah, but how did the movie make you feel? Like that's the thing I love about the DCEU fandom, and I know we're getting a little off topic of the actual main topic, but again, this is our bread and butter, guys. Welcome to our podcast. But seriously, like, one of the things I love about the DCEU fandom, and I know people might not necessarily agree with it if you're not in the fandom, but we have some seriously deep conversations about these films, and there's always something new in these films that we find, like, detail-wise, or that Zach teases, or whatever. But it's seriously, like, like, the MCU, I don't see that nearly that level of discussion as other, like, the DCU, or even, like, other film franchises, you know?
This is the thing I wanted to talk about, though, is that, like, there's definitely been a switch in the way that this fandom operates, because when I first joined this fandom, like, I've been part of the MCU fandom for a really long time. The MCU fandom has changed so much over the years, and I think that, you know, them changing their approach to filmmaking has definitely been part of that. It's just that, like, it's really been jarring on the fandom side, where, like, I used to follow, and I always bring this up when we're talking about it, but, like, I used to follow an entire Tumblr account that was just dedicated to historical relevance when it came to Captain America, and it was just someone who was obsessed with history and Captain America, and just connecting the dots and trying to assemble what Steve Rogers' experience of life was in the 40s, and how that differed from where he is now. And it was always interesting, it was always relevant, it always dive deep into the ideas behind the films. And I don't think necessarily that a lot of those films had a huge amount of content. I mean, it's not a Snyder level kind of thing. It's not like, you know, layers upon layers upon layers, but people were still willing to have those in-depth conversations about these things, and to say, like, you know, well, if we're going to imagine a whole universe around these characters, we want to, you know, explore the details and really talk about character motivations, and really talk about setting, and really talk about, like, how does the existence of S.H.I.E.L.D. change the world? How does the existence of Hydra change the world? Does it have an effect on the way that history has gone so far? And what does the MCU world look like in the presence of superheroes, and all of this really good, meaty stuff that we used to talk about? And now it just seems like it's all jokes and thirst. And it's like, I love jokes and thirst. Like, the DCU fandom is full of jokes and thirst, but you need both things. And I feel like we've lost one of those things. We've lost the other half of it, which is, like, why do we care about this universe, and how do we care about this universe?
Yeah. As someone who's been on Tumblr since I was 13, which, 6 years, like, I totally agree with you. Like, what my favorite thing about, like, being on Tumblr, being on the internet always was, you know, that subculture of geeks and of, like, fans in every fandom who would go in depth into, like, the meta of it, you know, to try to think about different dimensions of it, try to analyze it from different angles, try to, like, expand on the universe and stuff like that. And, like, that kind of stuff, like, trying to imagine, like, what Steve's life would have been like in the 40s, trying to imagine, like, the psychology of the relationship between different characters, like, whether or not the movie itself actually showed all of that, you know, coming up with stuff like speculation, meta-analysis, that was, and whether like and having different interpretations of things, you know. I know like people had different theories which overlap, but I just love reading all that stuff, you know. There was like engaging dialogue, people thought about things, people like really were okay with having different opinions sometimes, and yeah, people argued a lot and blah blah, but I mean, we argued, we were allowed to air our opinions, and it could be respectful. Like right now it's just you pick a side, and each side has already somehow determined all its beliefs, and you know, we have to pick a side or else you're going to get attacked, and if you say offline, everyone's going to hate you, you know, and that's just like detrimental to having conversation. I think it's really evident. I think it's a huge shame, and I miss it. I miss that culture that we used to have. I miss listening to people's opinions. I you know, even if I didn't agree with people, I still enjoyed reading them, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I still enjoyed having that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's my experience of fandom. Like, that's what fandom is to me. So it's very weird that fandom has become something like so much more different and very shallow, and sort of like, you know, about loving what you like, loving those things like beyond the level of reason, really. And I think that, like, you know, it's not even just the MCU fandom. I think that, you know, we have that sometimes in our fandom too, where we're just sort of like, you know, we have this idea that like you have to, you know, you just fall in line and you buy the party line, and you know, we all have the same beliefs, and like we know that's not true because, you know, we have this podcast. Like no one knows that better than the people in this chat right now.
Yeah,
you know? We know that everybody has different shades of beliefs, and everybody comes from somewhere else, and that's the richness of fandom. That's what makes it fun and interesting. If you're all just getting together and being like, yeah, that was great, yeah, that was great. Like, there's a reason that the MCU fandom is kind of shrinking in its activity, because nobody has anything really to do. That conversation becomes very flat when it's just like, you know, I mean, like, reviews for the MCU are such a buzzkill. Like, I don't want to hear this is the best MCU film ever. I want to hear, great, you know, what you thought in detail.
It's like, oh, this movie was vapid and shallow and had no meaning whatsoever, but it was fun, and so 5 out of 5 stars.
I mean, yeah, and that's the thing, is that, like, you can't trust the reviews anymore, and the reviews seem like reticent to comment on it. They're all like, well, you know, like, it's an MCU film, and it's like, what does that mean? Like, you need to explain what that means, especially from your perspective. You know, you need to do some actual work here and sit down and say, okay, well, how does this fit in? Like, we can't have this conversation about Ragnarok without having a conversation about how we feel about the MCU as a whole, because that affects how people take our opinion.
Yeah, be clear about like your criteria for like what makes it good. Why is it good? What are you judging this by? Tell me. Like, they don't have credibility, and the only credibility they have is that they are towing the party line, and that's not credibility. That's just like echo chamber.
Yeah, and I think that the way that that's reflected in fandom is what's really detrimental.
It's hard.
I think with time, usually with a lot of fandoms, like, when it starts out small, there is a lot of that discussion, and there is a lot of that conversation of, you know, theories, ideas, and whatnot. But I feel, and I've noticed this because, like, I used to be part of the Supernatural fandom. And, yeah, used to be part of the Supernatural fandom. But, like, I've noticed that when something goes on for too long, like, the discussions and theories of things like that starts sort of to window down, and then it just gets into, you know, thirst and a few things like that. There's no real discussion.
I argue against that. The thing is that it only devolves into that when, like, the source material doesn't give you anything. You know, if you have theories and then, like, the source material continues to fuel you, you know, sometimes it will confirm something and it might not confirm something, and it shows that the creators have actually put an effort into, like, ensuring that what they produce has meaning to the fans and like is in line with what the fans are interested in and what hooks the fans into the show and what keeps them speculating about the show, then like the fans will continue to be engaged. You know, something like I experienced with like the Legend of Korra, because like I really wasn't there when like the Last Airbender came out, but I was very, very present in fandom when Legend of Korra was airing. It's like, if the creators make it clear that they are as invested as the fans in like the character arcs, into the analysis of it, into the meaning of the show, you know, then the fans are gonna be right there along with the creators, discussing that, speculating, and coming up with so much more content, you know. Like, you know, in the span of a show, the creators can only show so much, then the fans would want to fill in the gaps, you know. And if the creators say, oh, we are invested in this world building, so we're going to show you this bit of civilization, and you can do what you want with it. And then fans are going to keep generating that. And you know, that stuff can go on forever. You know, if you consistently have a good show, then you consistently have material to work with, and the fans will stay invested. But the thing is, the media itself is becoming more and more vapid. You know, you start watching a show and you're like, oh, these characters could go here and here, and then as you progress more and more in the show, it becomes evident that, like, you know, the writers have no regard for their original presentations of the character. The writers have no regard for how these characters are going to develop over the course of the show. They just have no regard for that whatsoever, and so you're just like, there's no point in me investing my effort into speculating and to trying to come up with theories about what's going to happen, because whatever's going to happen is just going to have absolutely no meaning, no relevance to me. I'm not going to feel satisfied, no matter if I care. If I try to think of a possible ending which will satisfy me, and I watch the show, I'm just going to be disappointed because the writers aren't as invested as I am. You know, that was my experience when I was watching Arrow. Okay, you know, I'm a DC girl, but the DC TV shows have disappointed me very much. Like Arrow. Okay, for example, like the story of okay, sorry to Olicity fans. Like, Olicity is whatever. I have my own opinions on it, but my greatest disappointment was just like the lack of development of Oliver's character, you know, and maybe the evolution of Black Canary, you know, like stuff like that. Like, as early as the first and second season, those were really good because, you know, you could see Oliver's character developing. But then after a while, you're just like, okay, and this is where Oliver's character could go next, and that would be so interesting and for his character. But no, they chose instead to, you know, drag out certain conflicts and then introduce certain secondary conflicts and then just sort of screw over certain characters, you know. And it's like, each episode you're thinking, okay, maybe they could do something to improve it, send this character on a different tangent, something that could make it deeper. And then like the more the show strays off from its original purpose, the more the show proves over and over again that they don't care about the same things that I do as a fan, the less invested I am in like continuing to speculate, continuing to engage in fandom, you know. And then the more like the fandom itself becomes shallow and polarized, you know, it becomes like the entirety of fandom becomes concentrated on like the shipping, or like, if you don't like this character, then we're gonna hate you, and if you think this character deserves a different treatment from what you're getting on the show, if you don't agree with what the show's doing, then get out. You know, you once the fandom becomes like that, then the people who are more interested, like, if you're interested in speculating, and if you're interested in like coming up with different possibilities, like, I'm open to hearing different possibilities that are different, or even like opposing to my own views. Like, it just becomes very frustrating to try and engage. It's very frustrating to read. It's frustrating to like just even exist in that space. So like, after a while, for the sake of your own mental health, rather than causing unnecessary drama and such a toxic environment, you just leave, you know. And then eventually all the people who are like interested in engaging in discussion just get exhausted. Like, I've seen that happen for all these fandoms that I love, you know, and it's just so frustrating. And it's happening for like movies in particular. Like, it started off like the MCU started off with like movies which had depth, you know. Like, I remember Danielle telling me about like looking forward to Age of Ultron and like having all this and being prepared to like write about it and discuss about it, and you're having all these opinions about like what these characters could do and how these characters could go, and no matter how they went, you would want to say something about it. And then the movie comes and like punches you in the face, and you're just like, oh man, I do not want to engage with. I don't want to continue to support writers who disregard the characters this way. I don't want to be engaging with people who enjoyed it, because those people who, if somebody enjoyed this, then I would feel so uncomfortable with them that I wouldn't want to engage with them, you know, something like that. And that's just like the way like the creators are responsible for, I think, what happens within the fandom. And it's just, you know, it's not just the fandom that's the problem anymore. It's like the creators who are fueling this way of engaging with the material, encouraging fans to engage with it that way by acting in this way, and like disregarding like fans who like disregarding the views of certain fans, you know what I mean? Yeah,
I think that I think
that was long. Sorry.
I think to a certain degree it is true that you kind of get the fans that you deserve, and I think that that's true. I mean, I think it's especially true of TV series, because TV series go in a specific direction, and you know, they can kind of, like with Arrow, they kind of pair off the fans they don't want by doing the things that they do, and that there are people who are going to fall off because of the misogyny, there are people who are going to fall off because of the racism, and then what you have left is people who are cool with that. And that means that you end up with the fandom that you deserve, and I think that affects tone-wise too. I think that the tone that the fandom takes toward those pieces is definitely reflected by how cool they were with whatever was objectionable in those pieces. And it's like, you know, you get the fandom you deserve sometimes. I don't think it's always true, but I think that a lot of times it's easy to see how it's true.
Yeah.
And that's why, like lately, I can say, like, with, like, myself being a part of the DCEU fandom, like, I've had a lot of frustration lately with the DCEU fandom, and just, like, how, and not even, it's not necessarily, like, entirely the film's fault, but just, like, fandom behavior, and this isn't just, like, an entirely a DCEU thing, but just fandom behavior after a while, because once the things, whatever piece of media it is that's really starting to take off or become popular, of course there's going to be, like, a ton of, like, shitty people end up in the fandom, and it's those people who, like, at least with the DCEU for me, who are really starting to taint my enjoyment of the films and of the fandom itself, when everything has to become about the films. Or, like, someone made, like, the one rapper who died recently, I can't remember his name, but the one who was shot and killed.
Temptation.
Yeah, that guy. Someone, I know this isn't related to the conversation, but this has just been really frustrating, and I want to bring it up. Some guy who's a Zack Snyder fan was like, he's like, oh, we'll give him a shot, because this is like when everyone was jumping on the bandwagon after Zack Snyder's daughter died. I'm like, dude, fucking no. Like, no. Stop. Not everything has to pertain to Zack. Stop it. It's, like, no. First of all, how dare you fucking bring up her name? And under a subject not related to her in any way whatsoever. Not everything.
So wait, hold on. Hold on.
Not even that, but like the suicidal death of a young woman being compared to, as I understand it, a rapper who beat the shit out of women.
Yeah. Okay. So I can say
interesting context.
Yeah. So I can say a lot about XXX. So the thing about XXXTentacion was that he I can say it like in different perspectives. Basically, he was someone who always gave other people positive, like, influence. However, he himself was not a positive influence. And yeah, he beat up his girlfriends and stuff like that. He got into a lot of fights. He did a lot of negative stuff, you know. So wait, Nick, this guy said that he basically compared XXXTentacion's death with Autumn's death?
Yep.
Because if he did, those are two very different things. Because X got shot, Autumn did suicide. You can't really compare them. And if you're going to compare Autumn with X, then that's even worse. Because X was an asshole. Like, completely. So that makes no sense. That's weird.
No, and then the guy was, because everyone kept pointing out, like, dude, like, why the fuck would you bring that up? That has nothing to do with it. Then he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I was so wrong, and he, like, started playing, like, victim card. I'm like, dude, like, you should know the two don't correlate. I'm not condoning bullying or anything, like, to this guy, like, and it seemed like he felt really bad about it, because I was kind of, like, seeing what he was posting after the fact, but still, like, you should know not to compare everything back to Zack if you're a DCE fan or a Zack Snyder fan. First of all, he wouldn't want you to do that. If I were him, I would be so pissed. Like, if that was the sort of thing like the fans were doing. Like,
my thing, first of all, it like really hurts me to like hear that people do stuff like this. But like, honestly, like, just me being on Twitter, like, there is like one in like 100,000 DCU fans who act like that.
Yeah.
So like, you know, there's gonna be crappy people, but like, my experience is that like this is like a really wonderful, like, kind group of people. But like, I know like that doesn't excuse like to say like, oh, we're perfect, you know, like ignore those guys. But like, you know, like, I just don't want to like give off the impression that like, oh, they're like the fandom is rotting or something. Like, I don't think so. Like, I think this is still a really good group of people, you know.
Yeah.
I think we need to get a little better about policing our own, because I think that when we started out, we were much better about policing people in the fandom and saying like, hey, that behavior is out of line. It doesn't represent us. You need to stop it. But like, we have people, I mean, we have Snyder Cut people who have been out of pocket for a while. They have been coming in on Zack's threads, on David Ayer's threads, on like just like harassing people who have nothing to do with the project, and just, you know, like there's a level of respect that kind of keeps slipping. And I think that, you know, it's really hard, because on one hand we have people who are honestly really enthusiastic about the Snyder Cut for all the right reasons. There are a lot of people out there who are saying like, yeah, well, like, we need to do this for Zack. Zack deserves to have his vision seen. You know, the fans deserve to be able to see, you know, what he did with it. And then there are people who are like, you know, taking kind of like a Last Jedi kind of approach to it, where they're saying like, well, here's the thing, like, we didn't like what we got from this movie, so we deserve a whole nother movie, you know, and you need to give it to us, or we're gonna XYZ. And it's like, it's not what the Snyder Cut movement, in my understanding, is about. It's about like justice for Zack. It's about justice for, you know, for the franchise. It's about all the people who worked so hard on this film getting their best work seen by a large audience. Like, that's my understanding of the Snyder Cut. And I think that there's a lot of different agendas in the mix, and I think that has been a thing that has kind of, it's hard, because like there's a lot of voices out there, and not all of them have thought it through. And I think that's a really good example. He absolutely did not think before he tweeted that. That's crazy. I don't, you know, sometimes you jump the gun and you want to support someone so much, but like, I don't understand how these people choose who they support, because like, come on, like, how important could this guy have been to you that you have to like take it there, that you have to like, that you really have to like get on the internet and be like, hey, stop being, you know, stop being gleeful about this guy's death, stop making jokes about this guy's death, because joking about death is off limits for this fandom. It's not. Sorry. I mean, it's not. I think, like, you know, I have a short list, but there are people that I would definitely get on Twitter and clown around if they died. Sorry. We have a lot of Nazis in this country.
I don't know. So I agree with you that things should be called out when they're wrong, but at the same time, how do you police, and who polices who, and who is okay to say what people... Do you get where I'm coming from?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I understand, and I fully agree with you with the whole, some people have certain agendas where, you know...
I just think what happens is that people end up doing is that they end up being like, well, this person's pro Snyder, so like I'm on their team automatically, instead of thinking like, do I agree with what this person is saying, and am I willing to say like, hey, that's not cool? And we should all be more willing to say, hey, that's not cool. Hey, this isn't the right direction we want to take it, you know. And I think that we all, the majority of us have really good judgment about that. And I think that, you know, if we just start saying it when it needs to be said, it makes a difference, instead of just being like, well, this guy's
citizen politics in America.
it's very reflective of sort of like how partisan everything has gotten, and how the internet is sort of like my team, your team. I don't agree with everyone on my team, ever.
I'm on the literal other side of the world, and I can see America is scary.
It is.
Yeah.
Like, and that's like honestly like it's you can go ahead.
It's so crazy because 8 years ago, maybe 9, to me I was like, yes. Back in high school, I was like, yay, I want to go study in America, get my university degree there, do something in the science industry, whatever it is, whether it's medicine. I know doctors aren't scientists, but, you know, something to do with the human body. Mm-hmm. And then you slowly realize what America is like, and I'm just like, whoa, Fatma, what were you thinking? Because no, I'm good. I like Britain. I like the UK. I'll just stay where I am, because why do you guys pay for healthcare? And why is it such a huge issue that people literally like want to kill each other over?
Basically, the idea.
why is university so extortionate? Like, the money that you spend on university in America is equivalent to like a decent 1-bedroom flat here to buy and keep for yourself after you've converted the money. So in my head, this is me just talking about, you know, let's remove the racism, let's remove the hatred, let's remove the white supremacy, let's remove the Nazism and lack of empathy. This is just talking about general policy in the US, which really baffles me. Like, I thought it was a developed country, and I don't get why the United States gets the developed country, because it's not fair for everyone in the country, and there's a lot of people that are in poverty, and Flint hasn't been sorted out for years. If it happened in the UK, the Prime Minister would have to resign if it didn't get fixed within a 3-year period. But how long has Flint been happening? Sorry, this has turned into a political
4 years
thing.
now?
For Ragnarok. But yeah. Thor Ragnarok. Well, it was a meh movie. It's enjoyable if you just don't want to think about anything and just watch something funny and colourful. But yeah, America kind of scares me, and I don't want to go until things kind of like even out and people aren't so hate-filled and so angry about people that aren't white. I don't get it. It's
not going to happen anytime soon.
And for a person who's Muslim, travel ban, I was like, well, is it cutting up?
Let's clear it up now, I think.
Okay,
yeah.
So as soon as that happened, I was like, so I guess San Diego Comic-Con is out of question for a few years, and New York is out of question for a few years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna go anywhere in the U.S., I mean, I might be a little biased considering I was born and raised here, but San Diego, if you're just going to visit, it's a pretty nice place to visit. It's not like it's pretty diverse place. So there's not a whole ton of like hate crimes or things like that. Like, so I mean, you'll experience some of that like anywhere, I feel like, but here I feel it's a pretty nice place. So, and of course, Comic-Con's here. So
everything in this country is a huge mess. But I would say that if anyone's going to secede out of just common sense, it's going to be California. Oh, so yeah. I don't necessarily disagree with that.
Yeah. Well, that's funny because
like wrestle a gator.
No, Florida has quite a bit of racism and a bit of weird, like, this is far too crazy. It's like a whole.
I've heard so many weird stories about Florida. How is Florida even a state considering how much weird shit goes on there?
Florida is like a meme.
It's wow. I don't think we've ever gotten this far off track before.
Exactly. So I'm just here listening to everyone talking, and I was like, wait, I thought we were here to, like, talk about Ragnarok and see whether it's okay.
Well, we started with the problems of fandom, and then it just kind of
landscape of America.
Well, it started with just our issues with fandom, and then it just kind of went off on a tangent, and kind of just kept on going. But yeah, was there anything else you guys wanted to, cap off on the conversation as far as Thor goes?
I want to talk about Hulk.
Oh yeah, we haven't talked. Well, the
Hulk.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I don't know whether you guys mentioned
a whole episode about Hulk. Just saying.
But like, I'm not a huge Hulk fan, so I wouldn't really know much about him. But did you feel that he was done justice?
Nope.
No. Like,
with Hulk.
Yeah.
I mean, because the Hulk has really been limited to Avengers movies in the films, because, he got a reboot from his solo film. His character has been pretty flat, because, Avengers films, Whedon, his character in general has been pretty flat, but this movie just kind of drove the knife in a bit and twisted.
Drove the nail into the coffin.
Yes, that was the one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, my whole life, guys.
I'm surprised. No, I'm surprised I knew it.
Yeah.
Well, I do know it, but I actually said it somewhat right.
So, I think with Hulk was like when I was like really young, back during, I don't know what year it was, but do any of you remember that Hulk movie by Ang Lee?
Yo, yeah, that was like 2003, I think. Yeah.
That was the Hulk. That was the movie that got me into Hulk in the beginning, because it really explored different elements of this character that I felt haven't been explored before with the Hulk, and it's what made me such a huge Hulk fan back in the day. I literally got Hulk memorabilia, those Hulk smash fists, the toys with the.
Oh, I remember
fists.
those. Yeah.
Yeah, I was a huge fan of Hulk, and when I heard the 2008 one come out, I was excited for that one, and then I saw it, and I enjoyed that big ass fight scene at the end against Abomination. And then there came after that where it felt like Hulk was just sort of the punching, smashing, and destroying machine that he was, but I really didn't feel there was any depth with, Bruce Banner tackling the whole issues with him. I remember in the first Avengers movie where he talked about how he tried to kill himself, but the other guy caught it. And I felt that was a semblance of depth to the character. And then Ragnarok came and completely shit all over that, for literally no other reason other than to make jokes. Because in Ragnarok, it felt like Hulk's, he learned how to talk a little bit better, but at the cost of him having any semblance of, I don't know, interesting development. He just felt like a big 6-year-old in a giant green monster man's body.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
I really want to talk about. Yeah. I really want to talk about Bruce abuse in this movie, because it's rampant and it's upsetting, and it's probably the part of the film that I can forgive the least.
Yeah.
Are you
gonna talk about it?
I do want to talk about it, but I want to let everybody else talk about it first, because I'm gonna go off.
Okay, in that case, I'll throw in I'll throw in my 2 cents. I was excited to see see Hulk back, because up until Thor Ragnarok, I still enjoyed Ruffalo's Hulk for what it was, other than landing on Black Widow's chest because of Joss.
he does some great subtle things, and he has some really good moments when he's not being, you know,
the joke
written into a corner. I do like Ruffalo as the Hulk. I will say that.
But that being said, for me, Ragnarok ruined the Hulk in so many ways. It just felt like, and also to go back to that awful romance between him and Black Widow, like I was hoping we were beyond that we were so far removed from that, and then to be reminded of that, it just.
Yeah, it made no sense, that romance. It was weird. Like, was that a thing in the comics that was going on?
Well, the thing is, he has a love interest, but they refused to acknowledge anyone else from the original Incredible Hulk film except for Ross. That's it. That's literally the only thing that's carried over from the Incredible Hulk film. Because they recasted Norton, they pretended like Elizabeth Ross doesn't even exist anymore. And it's just...
No.
Yeah. But yeah. I hate what they did with Hulk. Like, they literally turned him into like a bumbling idiot. And like, yes, like I like that there was some amount of like development with Hulk and like in like Avengers and stuff. Like, but like the fact that they had him like talking like a 2-year-old child, it felt like a Saturday morning cartoon, but like a bad one.
Yeah.
And So, I mean, I don't have anything more to say beyond that, because I hated it, and it didn't make me happy. So, Danielle, if you want to go ahead and go off, now's your time.
Oh, yeah, wait. Yeah. Yeah, you can go.
Okay, here's the thing. Bruce spent more than a year, like 2 years or some shit. He lost several years of his life to the Hulk. That's the premise of this movie. That's the premise at which we start. We start with the fact that he has basically been the Hulk non-stop since the end of Age of Ultron. That is so impactful. That is something that should have ruined his entire life. That definitely did ruin his entire life. Something that just tore apart his brain. And, like, he has so much trauma from the fact that, like, this hitchhiker has been living inside of him. And, I mean, like, he still conceptualizes the Hulk as totally different from him. So we're going with that. That's the character's perspective. It doesn't matter what the actual physical reality is. The character's perspective is that he is not the Hulk, and the Hulk is the other guy. We set that up very, very specifically. So we're talking about another being inhabiting Bruce Banner for years. And not only that, but metaphorically, we're talking about basically him being in a rage spiral for years. Him being literally on fire with rage for this long. Like, something terrible happened to him to make that happen, and something terrible has happened to him in the wake of it. And for them to just sort of bring him back and immediately make jokes about his nudity, and immediately make jokes about putting him in Tony's clothes, and immediately turn everything about his trauma into a joke was so upsetting and so disorienting that I couldn't focus on anything else in the film every time Bruce was on screen. Every time Bruce was on screen, I was like, you cannot keep him from mourning this. You cannot. And the thing is that, like, the way that people around him were treating him, especially Thor, who's supposed to be one of the most empathetic Avengers, who's supposed to be his friend, is just literally spent an entire scene trying to figure out how he can exploit Bruce and make him turn into this monster that he's not sure he can turn back from. Like, he's basically just like, well, what if we, like, in order to get Asgard back, we just deleted Bruce? No big deal. You know, it's a thing that has to happen. Like, it's just like, it's like he's just as insensitive to Bruce's situation as the filmmakers are, because they're just figuring out how they can get their CGI nut off. And honestly, I couldn't give less of a shit. Like, it doesn't matter to me. Honestly, the most boring parts of Bruce Banner being in this series has been the parts where he's the Hulk. I don't care. Like, unless he's throttling Loki and he's giving Tom Hiddleston an adorable moment, I don't give a shit. I really couldn't care less about the Hulk parts. What matters to me is, like, who Bruce Banner is. And obviously none of the filmmakers care. And I'm so done with the filmmakers not caring. Like, he's one of the most interesting, emotionally volatile characters in the entire franchise, and we're just going to treat him like he's inconvenient. We're just going to treat him like he's an obstacle on the way. Like how does Ruffalo even stand it? Like, honestly, he doesn't get to do any honest work in this film. He just shows up and plays befuddled straight man so Chris Hemsworth can have a movie where he's got comedic beats. Like, what is happening and why? Like, I'm horrified for Bruce. I'm horrified for anybody who's invested in Bruce Banner. I'm horrified for the very idea that he's a giant metaphor for all sorts of mental issues, and we are bulldozing those people. Like, it's just, there's so much about it that was just so wrong. And most of all was that, like, and it comes back to Thor has zero empathy for him. Thor is beyond ready to just sort of move on and be like, oh well, like, we're done with that. Like, you know, oh, you were missing for a couple of years? No big deal. No one even wondered where the heck you were. You know, I mean, like, it's just getting back to the theme. And if we're going to really use him the way that everybody uses him in the MCU, we should at least be honest about how ugly it is. We should at least be honest about how gross it is for an actual self-proclaimed hero to show up and be like, hey, how can I use the monster that lives in your chest who hurts you whenever you come out?
Yeah, and I have issues with this too. Because if you notice, like, after Age of Ultron, like, no, during and after Age of Ultron, it feels like Hulk has suffered through a whole lot of abuse as a character in general. And it really feels like he's just genuinely been thrown around to just be that strongman, and then when they're done with him, they just kind of throw him away. Because that's what happened with at the end of Age of Ultron. They were like, okay, we're done with him. Let's just send him off to space and hope he goes wherever. And then during Ragnarok, he's just been in, like you said, he's been in this rage-induced feeling for about 7 years. And that has to have some sort of turmoil on his, like, psyche, on, like, Bruce Banner's whole psychological thing. It feels like. And then when Infinity War comes around, he's basically, like, when Infinity War comes around and he sees Tony again, Tony's like, okay, turn into the big green monster because we really need him right now. As if you didn't just send him away on a spaceship like it was nothing before. And then the whole feeling of Bruce trying to wake up Hulk, it's like, well, weren't you stuck in his brain for about 7 years? Wouldn't you not want to bring him back? But, like, he does, and then Hulk doesn't want to come out because he's, like, scared to fight Thanos again. And Hulk just feels like he's, like, a mess. Like, it just feels like the entire character just took a big leap downward, like, after Avengers. And that's just my general feeling of him.
And that's what, like, honestly, like, I think Hulk is, like, my least favorite part of Infinity War as well, because it continues that shitty characterization, and I think it made me realize that, like, ever since the event, like, the first Avengers film, like, and it's not Ruffalo's fault, but they've been slowly turning this character into a really shitty one at that. Like, I enjoyed Ruffalo's Hulk for what it was in the Avengers. Like, I still preferred Edward Norton's Hulk, but then as the films went on, it just felt like it didn't really feel like a Bruce Banner like that I knew from the comics, or the one that was already established in the previous film. Like, he felt like he was more there to, like, be the guy to say, "Oh no, Tony," when Tony's not going to listen to him, and to become the guy who's like, "Oh no, Thor," and then Thor's going to do it anyway. Like, it's, and then everyone's basically everyone's using him to get to Hulk, and that's so shitty because it's like, no one has ever taken into account like Bruce's actual feelings into a situation regarding the Hulk, and it's. You would think after several films, like, his so-called friends would understand that, but, like, Thor Ragnarok just established that, like, no one gives a shit. Like, it's... I don't know. I just... At this point, I could care less about the Hulk. I used to want a standalone Hulk movie. Now I don't, because I don't trust Marvel with this character anymore.
Yeah, and people have the nerve to say that Ang Lee's Hulk wasn't that good. To which I say you are out of your mind, because Ang Lee did so much for the Hulk that you can compare him to the 2008 version of Hulk. Because I don't know if you guys have seen the Ang Lee version of the Hulk film. Have you guys?
I saw it like once, when it first came out. It's been a long time.
There's just such a very there's such a depth to this version of Hulk, because I think I remember someone said it to me once that the Hulk in this film, like in the Ang Lee early 2000 film, like that version of Hulk when he turns into the big green monster. It's the physical personification of his childhood rage due to his abusive father who turned him into that Hulk. And the only way he can, like, really let go and feel that anger is if he turns into this big green hulking monster who essentially goes on a rampage. But it takes the girl who he's in love with to really slowly bring him back and back. And then in this plot, the father also becomes a sort of otherworldly being, and it's this very, I don't know how to articulate it that well, but generally this film really goes deep into Hulk's entire psyche and persona, and I just enjoy it. And it annoys me when people say that, they just say that this movie's boring because it tries to, it's too emotional, it's too emo, it makes Hulk too vulnerable, and it makes him not as awesome as he is. And that annoys me because it really loses the depth of what Hulk really is, as a character. Like, I haven't read the Hulk comics, but I'm pretty sure he has some sort of depthness to him that allows him to have an actual growing character moment. But people seem to just want him to be the dude that's big, green, and smashes things all the time, all day, every day. To the point where they're actually okay with how he was in Ragnarok. And that worries me because I feel like there's so much more that can be done with Hulk, but no one wants to give him a shot.
I'm also not very familiar with the Hulk comic books, but like it kind of seems to me like the people who are really the people who are complaining about the more complex Hulk characterizations want the version of the Hulk that they've seen in crossovers, and they want the version of the Hulk that the Hulk definitely becomes when he's written by someone who's not writing about the Hulk. They're just writing about him as part of a team, which I think is very similar to the problem that Superman kind of comes across, which is that a lot of people who write Justice League do a really bad job with Superman and making him complex and making him interesting, and they just think like, Superman should be that flat, convenient character who does, the heavy punching. And I think that that's really risky when it comes to the heavy punching characters, because they can just turn into, that's just the tank, he just takes damage, that's all he does. And then that sort of that reduces him to sort of like a very flat character. And I don't think that, in all the live action stuff, I would say and I've seen all the live action stuff. Like I watched the old series as a kid. It was one of my favorite things. But I'd say that from the get-go with the live action stuff, the Hulk has been a psychological thriller character. He's been about psychology. He's been about the ins and outs and the machinations of rage, and how you deal with rage in productive ways. And like him getting the anger part of him was always supposed to be metaphorically resonant. And it's really weird that that people are so focused on like the 20 seconds in every team up when we get broken sentences from Hulk, and he's a comedic character. I've never conceptualized him as a comedic character given all of the live action stuff, but I've also never read the comics.
Well, so actually, on that note, I have to play closing because I have to get ready for work here in a second. But I do want to thank you guys for joining me today. I'm glad we were finally able to do this and get our thoughts out. I do want to close out by saying this. If you disagree with us, feel free to do so, but at least in a civil way. We don't mean to offend anyone or to, start arguments with people, but hey, we don't mind civil discussion here. That's what this podcast is all about. Hey, we all had differing opinions on Thor Ragnarok and the MCU, and that's perfectly fine. These discussions are going to continue to be had throughout this entire podcast. So yeah, if you guys seriously don't listen to any of our other podcasts, I would give those a listen as well, because you hear a lot of our thoughts on a lot of other subjects in the DCEU, as well as all the other stuff we go on about for 20 minutes outside of the DCEU during those. But seriously, thank you guys here today. Danielle, Al, Fatma, Jean, Rebecca, thank you guys so much. So if you guys want to go close out and tell everyone where they can find you online.
Well, you can find me on my Instagram, Al Speed, or you can just find me on Tumblr as Speed of the Oppressed. I also got a YouTube channel, if anyone's interested in that, where I do reviews of movies and stuff. So, if you want to check that out.
Okay, bye everyone. I'm Jean. You can find me on Badjectivity on Tumblr.
I'm Fatma, and it was nice to join in, albeit I was late. And you can find me on Stay Awesome Gotham on Tumblr. Yeah.
I'm Danielle. I'm a Social Justice League on Tumblr, but I've actually been spending most of my time on Twitter lately at The Bravest Heart.
Again, of course, you guys can find me here at YouTube at Nerdy Nick, Twitter at True Man of Steel. That's where I spend a lot of my time as well. Tumblr at True Man of Steel. And if you guys are interested in our DC Films podcast, you guys can follow us there. Just look up DC Films Podcast on Twitter, and that's where we're posting all of our stuff regarding the various podcast info there. Thank you guys again, and thank you guys who's been sticking around for almost 3 hours now. We do appreciate it, and if you seriously let us know what you guys thought of our first episode here. It was a lot of fun talking with everyone here today. More of these episodes are definitely coming with various subjects to be tackled, whether it's The Last Jedi or our favorite TV shows or whatever going on. So yeah, definitely keep an eye on the channel for that and our various Twitters. Thank you guys for listening, and until next time, have a good one.